morning and happy Friday to everybody out there, and welcome to Beyond the Sim. I'm Shaun Cole with Billy Strange. How you doing, Billy?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well, except I just noticed I have my camera chopping my head off today. I'm not sure if I'm worried
Sweet.
about it. Just cutting off the bald part. That's okay. Uh, And welcome to Beyond the Sim, where we are here to talk about sim racing and what's going on, on the track, really. I mean, we cover the news, but it's really about finding great topics to just kind of discuss in detail. And right now we're on a great week because there's a lot going on in sim racing, if you think about it. You have the Assetto Corsa Competizione released just not long ago. People still getting used to that. You have a lot of new content that just came out on iRacing, Race Room, for that matter, R Factor 2 as well. It's been a huge week. Big update in Forza and Gran Turismo. I mean, really, every
Right.
sim from, across the board, the entire spectrum have seen updates. So, I always like to start things off with what have we been doing, because I think that's the heart and soul of sim racing for all of us out here, which is, what are you doing out on track? What are you guys doing out on track? What is hot in your world? Billy, what about you? What have you been doing this week?
Oh, let's see. Well, number one, what is this? Episode 25? We have
Yes, I got the
25?
number right. 25 now.
Oh, and now he's adjusting his camera. And oh, what? You didn't want the haircut from the camera?
I like the shine.
Perfect. Let's see. As some people have known, I've been trying ACC. And then what else? We did some racing. I actually tried all the new stuff in iRacing. So the Pro 2 and Pro 4 trucks. I tried the new Chevy and the Gander. Is that right now? It's the
Yeah,
Gander
the
Outdoor
gander.
Series.
Yes.
Tried the new Ford Mustang. Tried the new tire model on the Skippy. And tried their new beta update to their beta UI. It's definitely much quicker than before. They've added some more functionality to it. What else? I was gonna try the race room, the FR90s, but I didn't
Yes.
get a chance to do that.
I
So
really
that's on
wanted
my
to.
list.
I want to hear those. That was the
Right.
main thing for me. I want to
Yep.
get my headphones on, crank them up all the way and listen. I haven't got a chance to do it yet.
So yeah, I found that the most notable out of all that, I guess I'll say we'll talk about ACC and we'll talk about the trucks, but the NASCAR stuff felt like more NASCAR stuff. Nothing weird or odd going on there. The new tire model on the Skippy, I think, feels pretty good. It has a little bit of liftoff oversteer, which I found as long as I did a little power braking, kind of held the brake, and when I was braking, held the throttle on a little bit. It mitigated any snap oversteer or off throttle oversteer going into the corner. So I
That
don't know. It feels pretty good.
that goes back to the original Skippy handling, throttle oversteer, like a Porsche 911 handles.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I didn't feel like it felt natural to me. Like once I understood what it was telling me, I didn't think. The one thing I still feel like it does is it mutes some of the force feedback to me. And I'm talking like the detail. I'm not talking about when it loads up on the front end. Just I noticed sometimes when I would go over rumble strips and stuff, it wasn't very prominent. Not
Right.
that I particularly care about that, but I know some people do. Uh, Overall, I mean, it seems pretty good. Like last time, I don't know what is correct, and I didn't like mess with everything to find the problems and the exploits. I literally just took it right out of the box and drove it.
Right.
So I think I actually had fun driving it. So
Gosh, we're always on force feedback. Force feedback is, I don't know if we'll ever be done with that topic.
no.
You mentioned rumble strips. Like, for me, force feedback, maybe some of its most important aspects are some of that stuff. Because, like, now, driving down the freeway in my car, I hope to not feel much road noise. Like, if you feel a lot of road noise in your car, in your wheel, driving down the freeway, you probably have something wrong with your car, right? I mean,
Right.
A good car should be pretty quiet in the wheel. However, in sim, I actually want road noise because it's one of the few things that reminds me that I'm at motion because my rig is so static. rumble strips are the other one. Like, I might want rumble strip feeling and curbing feeling more or as much as any other force feedback effect. It's like those are the things that are just those instant, and it's and I know not all curbing is rumble strip type. Right?
Right.
Some are smooth, but it's like I even get mad at the ones that are smooth because I want that vibration. I want that,
How dare you do something like this?
Anyway, continue. I'm sorry, Shaun Tangent Cole here.
No, I think that what I kind of like is even when the rumble strips or the curbing per se is smooth, I do want to feel the weight difference.
Right. That hit
because
of the
you're
curb.
unloading. Yeah, you're unloading part of the car, so your weight balance has changed slightly. So those are things you should feel. And I don't mind a little bit of, when there is, I guess we'll call it noise from the rumble strips. I don't mind feeling a little bit of that. I don't need a ton, but I just need enough to kind of give me a hint of what's going on. Same thing with the road effects. I don't need a ton, but it is nice to feel. I'll kind of jump back real quick to ACC. One of the coolest things I thought was when I did the first practice session at the Nürburgring, at the GP course.
Uh-huh.
They had weepers going across the track. So weepers means water either rolling across or coming up through the asphalt.
Right.
You could feel that as you went. It was really cool. So and it was just enough to let you know that, and when the back tires hit and you're on slicks, you just had to lift just a little rolling across. It was really neat. And then the next session they were gone.
Yes.
I thought that was a really cool thing. So getting back to force feedback, I like feeling things like that.
Yes. It blew my mind actually in ACC. I think it was in my rookie challenge on the career mode. And it was the third one or second one, and it was in the wet. It wasn't raining. And there was one or two big puddles at Monza coming out of the final corner. And the first time I hit it, it scared the life out of me at first. Because it felt like two punctured front tires at the same time,
Right.
Just like, wow, I've just lost everything here. And the car just kind of washed out to the left because it was a right-hand turn. And then I realized, oh my God, that was a puddle. That was standing water. And I'll tell you, I've driven wet track. I've done some racing in the rain. That is exactly what it feels like. I mean, that was if you want to talk about perfect force feedback, that was perfect force feedback to me. It was just like, whoa, the wheel went away and then it was back. And it was like, that was a puddle. Whoa. Anyway, go on.
So no, just talking about the force feedback stuff. I thought that part was kind of impressive just because you kind of get that in a Project Cars 2. It's not quite the same. It's either visually you see it, but you don't feel it. Or if you do feel it, it's not quite the same. Anyway, we'll get to ACC later because people asked us to talk about it. So yeah, I thought the new tire model on the Skippy actually works well. Again, I didn't try to find the exploits. So last time, there could be a thing where you just crank the wheel and that's it. You can just mat the gas pedal. But I thought it was good. I liked it. So I'm dying to get these on a car that I really want to drive, though. I don't mind the Skippy. It's fine. A lot of people really love it, and I understand that. It's just fine to me. It wouldn't, if you lined up all the cars, that would not be my first pick.
Right.
So I'm just waiting for it to be on something that I'm really interested in driving.
Sure.
What else did I do? I think that's about it. Other than I did play some other games, I finished Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and then I started another game called Observation, which is completely bizarre. Other than that, sim racing stuff. Yeah, a lot of time spent on ACC.
I was gonna say you're really underplaying because it's your videos titles alone show at least 18 hours of Assetto Corsa Competizione solo play. So I mean that's quite a bit of drive time in the span of a week alone.
Yeah.
Forget everything else. That's a lot of racing. That's a lot of driving.
Right. So we'll get to that later. What did you do? How about you? As I trip over my words, I can't speak English.
I have had a really interesting week of sim racing. Actually, I did a Skippy race which I love the Skippy, by the way. I seem to love slow cars because slow cars make for great racing. And I guess I'm a big fan of door-to-door, wheel-to-wheel, inside-outside, running 3 corners too wide on a road course. And doing that with a gang of people you trust is like the best moments. Because, I'm not a champion when it comes to racing, right? Let's face it. I mean, why do I? Because I love that competition. I mean, I played like on the equivalent of other sport. I played soccer until college. I bike raced until I was 30. And I really never was going to make an Olympic team or a pro soccer team. I was never going to make Team Trek and go to the Tour de France. I'm just not that level of athlete. I'm good. I'm really good. But at those sports. But even knowing that, it was the competition that I enjoyed as much as the prospect of a future. And I think when I really break down sim racing, I love that. So the Skippy, which we raced, an incredible race. That's why I'm kind of raving about this level of racing. It's like the open-wheeled Miata, essentially. You just couldn't get away from
That's a
people.
good analogy.
The races are the same,
Right.
And just some incredible racing. It was one of the best races I've ever had, and it was just fun. And then that led to something that it's going to turn into a little bit of a rant by me, I suppose. And it's a rant I've done before, so I should probably keep it short. But I was given an invitation to participate in the DHL Fast 50 competition. So for those of you who don't know what that is the last entry point into the F1 2018 Esport with the draft about to happen, with the silly season underway, Ferrari entering now, so it's all the teams. Certain drivers being dropped, other, openings being made, other deals. So now the actual draft is going to happen, and through some qualifiers, the grid was filled for the draft, so to speak. Then there's going to be this Fast 50 where you hot lap your way in. So I was given an invite through DHL and through Codemasters, 2 different invites actually. And despite me declaring that I'm not the level of an Enzo Benito or a Brendan Lay or anybody who will be in that series, I was pretty confident that I would not post a lap that strong. They still wanted me to participate. So I spent 2 days trying to get F1 2018 working on my system again. And it was the same old issue that I've had that dates back to Dirt, Rally, Codemasters F1 2010, name your Cody's game. I have always been plagued by controller mapping issues. And they change. Okay. It's not one issue across the board. But once again, I just couldn't get my throttle pedal mapped. I play 90 other games and it works great. All I need to do is invert that access. It won't let me do it. I'm looking through forums for solutions, finding people with Logitechs and Thrustmasters having the exact same issue. No resolution. And it just made me so damn mad. Tom Jones, thank you. Billy keeps looking at you. He's getting creeped out, he says.
That's right.
But it just makes me so mad that after 10 years of making sims, that they still are plagued by what I consider like level 1 basic flaws. Like, forget quality of driving, forget physics, forget graphics. It starts with the ability to drive. And so it just made me so mad. And so in the end, I could have thrown on the other rig, and I could have probably done it on the Thrustmaster wheel. But I was so angry that out of silent protest, I decided I was not going to send them a lap time. And I finally threw my hands up, and I'm like, forget you. You know what? I'm almost, I don't want to say that I'm done with their games, but I'm certainly done being nice about flaws that should have been resolved years ago and haven't. And for years, I was like, oh, they'll get it tomorrow. They haven't. Okay. They'll get it tomorrow. They haven't. They continue, and now what? The next gen, grid? Is it grid? I'm losing.
Yeah.
I'm excited about it. And then I'm like, wait, but it's not going to work with my controls. Maybe I don't even spend my $50 this time. I mean, I'm pretty pissed off about it. And I really wanted to, I was going to chronicle hey, I'm doing a fast 50 lap and I'll suck horribly. But anyway, that was that. And then on to brighter topics.
Well, real quick,
Yeah.
we were talking about that before the show, and now I remember that that's actually I had an issue with F1 2018 messing with my inputs. So I share your pain on that one. I did not have that with Dirt Rally 2.0. Everything clicked right away, but I did have that problem now that I remember with F1 2018.
I've had it with
So
various editions. They always Cody seems to remember when it was a RaceNet issue? Like if you didn't have your RaceNet account, you couldn't update your season, and it was like there's always something screwy behind it that just and I love their content, so it pains me to say this. It really does because I love Codemasters F1 2018. It's the best version of the title they've ever made. And for it to not be playable for me when it's also like the 10th version or 9th version of the game, come on. And again, that's step one. You have to be able to map your controls in a proper driving game. And I don't want to hear that it has to be pedals plugged into the wheel in 2019 either. It's like get over that. Those days are over. Those days are only on the Xbox and PlayStation. All right.
I don't think that's an unreasonable expectation.
No, it's too late and too far into this and too high-tech a world. And don't tell me that if Codemasters picked up the phone and said, hey, can you send us a pedal set, that it wouldn't arrive, right? So don't for a second tell me that you don't have access to the tools to do it. And when it comes to inverting an access, I'm no programmer. But, like, I can only imagine the amount of ones and zeros I got to click to map a whole beautiful image of a race, arena, a track and a car and all that, and then the physics and all that. But don't tell me it's a shit ton of ones and zeros to invert an axis on a control. Come on. I'm no coder, but it can't be that friggin' hard to make that an ability.
I will trust you. How about that?
I don't know if I can be trusted. Tim says maybe it's my overpriced pedals use the TGT. Yes, well, that's part of the problem. However, again, in reading up on the issue, I saw people with G29s having the same problem with a G29, which means they have...
I had the problem with the Fanatic pedals.
Yeah, I mean, so I've seen it on the basic level, not just on the high-end level. Dave Blair has a button on his wheel to invert his pedal axis. Really? I'd love to know how that works, Dave. All right, on with the show. So away from the bad and back to the good. And then the iRacing Week 13 build came out on Tuesday. This is my favorite build in a long time. I'm a little guy, and I've had a monster truck. No, I had a full lifted Tahoe on 36s, 6-inch lift.
Mm-hmm.
Total little guy syndrome, admitted. I love trucks. I've probably owned 8 different Chevy trucks and 2 different Toyotas, and I love trucks. The trucks came out, the Pro 2, Pro 4 trucks. I mean, like, as a kid, my dad used to take me to, like, motocross and stadium truck stuff. This goes back to, like, a love for, like, Ivan Stewart. We talked about Ivan Stewart.
Yep.
And,
I remember watching that stuff on TV when I was a kid. They do the Coliseum, and they had the little tiny the buggies as well.
Yeah.
Those were great.
It was great. And these trucks come out, and now Billy and I were talking off the air before. I'm going to admit one thing that I don't admit. I am not a really good off-road racer. Like, I can mountain bike, and that's different because they're not powered. But every time I've driven a dirt bike or a quad or off-road, I understand the physics, but I just am not a master. And so I went quad riding once with a couple of friends, and they just left me in the dust. I just couldn't even make the thing turn when I wanted to. So I am not a good judge of how these trucks handle, right? I am basing it on what I watched on TV as a kid growing up. So right. I get in them, though, and what do I feel? I feel big suspension. I feel big tires. Like, when you're turning the wheel, you can tell you're turning a giant tire compared to what we're accustomed to. Like, the way it feels, the way it flexes, the way it rotates even. Just, like, the amount of jacking because you have the caster multiplied by that size of tire, and it like really throws it around. Anyway, I love the way they drive. I love the balance. I love the certain things that it seems like you need to do, like rotation of body weight in the air, all these kind of things that I expect or are intuitive to me when it comes to driving and force feedback. Now, I've been dying to hear from people who really know dirt, because, again, I started this by admitting I don't. Like, if judging a road course car, I feel very confident because I've driven my share of cars on a real-life road course to kind of know where I'm coming from. I have no basis when it comes to dirt, and that's what I'm getting at. But forgetting how perfect they are or aren't, I'm putting that aside right now, and I'm like, okay, but I'm loving the force feedback. I'm loving the driving. The racing, when it's good, has become the best door-to-door, inside-outside racing I've ever experienced in sim racing, period. And then, I don't know what iRacing did to the contact, like the 1X, 2X, but my personal opinion from what I've seen so far, I think they nailed it. Like, you can really lean on someone in the corner, and it'll give you a 0X. And it's like, hey, we see that you touched him, but that was within the boundaries of dirt racing like this. And you can, and that's including bumping them from the rear, hitting them in the quarter panel, even a little bit of side-to-side banging, no problem. But the minute you hit somebody, like that G meter would spike, it's like, hey, now that was an X, and you get your 1X. And if you do anything super crazy, it will break your truck. So, yeah, I've already done, I don't know, probably 10 races in the trucks. We've done
nice.
endless community sessions. I've done a handful of streams, and then I've been building my ultimate VR rig for a long time. And I've been going slow about it. It's like, okay, cool. I'm putting the next level motion seat platform with the G seat on top of it with VR. And I'm like, I can't think of more immersion that I in this room can throw at myself. So to me, that's the ultimate immersion rig. And as soon as the trucks came out, I was like, oh, this is happening right now. And right. I was right back to work. And I titled it the Vomit Comet because I thought it was going to be too much. And then, much to my amazement, the VR with the motion in the seat and is crazy. I mean, the trucks, you're talking doing this, and right. this. And none of it was too much. It was awesome. It was like, I am so feeling this truck doing this and into the corners, and I'm feeling the rear end kick down like this. And, if you watch the streams, you're going to see me like counterweighting myself. And it took me back to go-karting days. Because even though you'd only maybe move in real life like this much, because that's how much you can push against your own muscle mass. But it feels like it's this much, because that's the effort it takes. Right. And so I'm driving it, and it's like, man, I'm in the corners, and I'm like, yeah, and it just...
That's great, though. I mean, that's how we want to feel when we're no matter what we're driving, that we want to get into it like that we want to have a good time, and that we want it to make sense, and the door-to-door, like all that stuff makes a big difference. It contributes to the enjoyment factor of what you're doing. So I would agree. I've had bunch of fun. I mean, I only got to run the one race with you guys, and then I just did some testing on my own. But even just driving the thing around and testing, I was having a great time. And then we did the race. I found that the Pro 2, I felt like I understood both of them. The Pro 2, I think, fits my style a little more.
Right.
So I feel a little bit more confident in that. The Pro 4 was interesting because I thought I had it, and then you guys were kicking my ass, and so I had to like rethink of how to drive the Pro 4 around the track. I think I was trying to drive it too much like the two-wheel drive, and it does make a difference. So I think they're great. I think they feel, both of them, I think make sense. I think they don't do anything odd to me. And yeah, I think that they're going to, I think I might try to run some official races with those this season just to see how it goes.
Oh, I'm in. There's only two tracks, there's only two tracks.
Right. Well, then we should all like put it up on, Discord or whatever
Our planned
when
attack.
we're gonna, yeah, like when we're gonna run and see if we all end up getting in the same room, because that would be fun too.
Yeah, and instead of it being like us doing a SImpit league or something like that, it's like, no, we crashed the 8 o'clock public Thursday night race.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Um, I'm glad you brought up the 2-4 topic, because I'm just so like in love with all of it. They're so distinctly different. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, there is no confusing. Like, you couldn't drive one for 30 seconds without immediately being like, dude, I mean, if someone, like, blindly put you in one, you would know very quickly which
Oh,
you were
instantly,
in.
yes.
And I am terrible in the two. I just cannot get it. And I can see why you would be really good, because to me, it's like, all the time you're in the corners, it's a lot like being in the dirt oval world on iRacing. It's like how well can you control that counter steer, over throttling, but not too much, because I'm learning that there's a point where you're spinning it too much.
Yep, and so you really have to work. And I think that was part of my problem with the Pro 4. I thought four-wheel drive, and so I was just matting my foot as much as I could.
Right.
And I started to learn that I needed to have a little more finesse with the Pro 4 than I thought I would.
Yeah. I'm finding that now I tend to be better at the Pro 4 than the 2. I'm finding that I can be very aggressive on entry. Like, throw it as much as I can on entry. And then from that moment on, it's almost like driving it on a road course. It's almost like, now that I've got the car turned, now I'm back to trying to nail that apex, keep my traction under control, and get a low inside line, and back on the gas as fast as I can. Versus the two-wheel drive, it's like you gotta moto those things the whole time or you're just slow.
Yeah, well, a really good example was for me was when I was running, what is it, Wild Horse, which is a kind of smaller track.
Yeah.
That last turn, my initial instinct was to try to run around the top.
Yeah,
All the way. It doesn't work well though, because what happens is you're still trying to hold that slide as you're coming to the jump, and then the thing jumps weird. So what works better is hang out wide and then turn early, come down late apex, basically hit low off the exit, so you're straight when you hit that tabletop like jump, and all of a sudden then it's smooth sailing and you just fly through that section of the track, where the Pro 4 didn't seem to need as much finesse in that regard. Like Pro 4, you can stab the throttle in the air.
Yeah.
I learned this from my brother because he races RC cars, and RC cars, 4 and 2-wheel drive, they're really prone to being able to whip and really change the attitude, just like motocross guys, supercross guys, everything like that. So what I had to learn was you can change the attitude of the truck with the Pro 4 much easier by changing the direction of the front tires and whether you're on or off the throttle. The Pro 2 doesn't react the same, so it's just kind of you're not stuck with it, but it definitely doesn't do the same thing as the Pro 4. And again, that was kind of my learning curve, because I spent a ton of time in the Pro 2, and then we went to race the Pro 4, and I was okay out of the box, and then everybody started getting it quicker, and I'm like, okay, what am I doing wrong? Damn it. And then it seemed like, to me, the engines were a bit fragile.
Yes, I've seen a lot of blown motors, and I'm not sure if it's a downshifting early, if it's damaged, because it might be like cracked oil pans for all I know with what we're doing.
I was trying to hold the real engines are fairly bulletproof. I mean, they will have issues, but those things you can really wring the hell out of. And I think what happens is what I was doing, at least when we raced, was it'd get up into the red, and I just continue to hold my foot down and then just slam the next gear. And then when it would hit a jump, I just leave my foot in it, trying to change the balance of the truck.
Right.
And I think doing that just grenaded, because I was actually hanging with you guys in the beginning, and all of a sudden down the straightaways, you guys just, and then Doug just flew past me. Jesse came. I mean, then I was just a hazard after that, because the truck was going so slow down the straight. I was like, what the hell happened? And that's all I could figure, because then when I went and did a repair, came back out, and I quit doing that, not only did I not have that problem again for the last half of the race, because we did like a 20-lap race, I also was getting my pace was getting better. So it took me a little bit to figure out the Pro Force. I'm still having a ton of fun.
We're gonna have to Doug Desert Dog Hawley. That guy is a dirt monster once he gets going. He
Yeah.
is like just a fish to water. Your mic's starting to get a little staticky. So while you maybe reset it, the other thing that I've experienced with these, unfortunately, is it's almost impossible to start a race without turn one being the worst dog pile up you've ever seen. Like right now, the racing doesn't even begin until the third lap. Oh, Billy went away. We'll wait for him to join. I'm not going to fix the video until he rejoins us here. But yeah, the race starts have been really played with overdriving and not respecting how slow that everybody's going to go in that corner. And then if you can survive the first couple laps, then the racing gets down to, and again, earlier I was talking about like Miata racing or Skippy racing. And man, me and Phil had like a 5-lap door-to-door, inside, outside. He'd be better here, I'd be better there. Inside, better line, outside, better line kind of fight. And this went on for 3, 4, 5, 10 laps on numerous different occasions. It's really been fun for me. I'm really enjoying it, and I really didn't expect to. So I'll tell you what, while Billy is away and we wait to see Billy's here.
I was going to say.
Your camera's not here.
It says I'm here.
Can I refresh on my end? Maybe I need to disconnect and reconnect.
Well, the Discord is kind of goofy because I hit the mute button and then it killed everything.
Yeah, it was really weird. Because normally you just mute your mic and come back.
Yeah, so I hit mute and...
Maybe I need to leave the call and rejoin myself.
Here, let me try this.
There he is. Okay. We got you back. Anyway, okay, so yeah, that's pretty much my final thoughts on the trucks. Is just I'm a little the race beginnings. Like, so when you get to racing, like out practice, I can practice them all day long. But when you do a race, and the races we've done have been a lot of fun, but I've yet to see anything that would even remotely resemble a clean start. I want them to add. This is my next requirement, I think, of sim racing. I think that when you have massive contact, I think it was Codemasters that did this with Dirt. I either want a completely fuzzy screen, like I want you to be semi-concussed, right? I think contact and sim racing, the sound effects need to be like quadrupled. Like, the amount of noise you should hear should frighten you to be a warning, hey, that was too much. You know, and like if two cars were just to have minor bumper contact in my parking lot, I would hear it through all these walls, because it's like, that is a big noise, you know? And I think sim racing needs to do better at magnifying impact.
Can you imagine all the people that would just throw an absolute fit if that happened?
I want black screen. I like that moment of hit. You know, again, at that moment that you get a 1x.
Need for Speed Shift, by the way. Which
okay, yes.
I apologize because I'm not quite sure how to say his name. Roll. But he mentioned it in chat.
Roll de Mulder. Yeah, I want that. I think that it would be a really advantageous to help people not hit people with such a casual attitude about it. You know, a little teeny bump, again, 0x tapping fenders on the trucks. No. But the moment you've impacted, that's a hard hit. And you're going to feel it. You're going to hear it. Your eyes are going to see it. And everything goes blank for that moment of time. And you know what? Do it.
So
That's
what you're telling me is that iRacing should implement a currency system when they come out with AI. And what happens is you have a virtual currency that's race entry, and you also have damage to your vehicle, and you have to pay for that damage. And if you don't have enough to pay for the damage anymore, you've got to go run some AI single player races, build
to
up your
build up
currency
money.
again, and then you can go do an entry and that way there's a penalty system.
From your mouth to Dave Kemmer's ears. uh, um, you know, what you just laid out, funny enough, was the original basis. So going back in time, I'm going to give people a little history lesson on iRacing.
All right. Everybody settle down, grab yourself a
Get some
whatever.
popcorn.
Yeah.
So if you played NASCAR 2003 by Papyrus, and you played in the leagues all the time, and you were working your way up on the league multiplayer world, you would have known. Oh, and forgive me, Nim, for not remembering the name. Virtual Racing League, VRL. If
That's what he was a part of or helped.
yes,
I remember him talking about that with you, I think.
and this was a super league of Papyrus NASCAR 2000, and so teams had to pay. First of all, you had to be really legit to even get invited or be eligible to be in the league. There was a waiting list for drivers to be drafted who had to prove themselves in other ways, or they would never be drafted. It was like joining a real racing series within our sim world. You had a budget for your team. Your drivers would cost you certain money based on ranking.
Okay.
And then you had to pay for damage at the end of the race. There was prize money, virtual, for race wins all the way down the line.
Right.
And so if you were consistently crashing and taking 38th place, your team would go bankrupt and would be then thrown out of the league and replaced with a new team with a bankroll.
Oh, wow.
And so this was a way of policing damage and
Okay.
holding. And this was before we had the damage contact models that we have now, where you actually can bump and bang a little bit.
Sure.
And man, I thought at the time, and I was trying really hard to break into that league because I didn't really know anyone there. So it was really hard to get into unless you knew somebody. And I knew of this league. I knew of Nimcross and the people in that league, but I was never able to actually participate. And then shortly after, that's when Papyrus became First Racing, and a lot of that was converted into an iRating and a safety rating system to work with the masses instead of a league control. And to this day, Nimcross is the man in charge of really the rules when it comes to contact and damage and protests. And it's just amazing that the same person who invented what was going to be the coolest thing ever, well, was because it was already going on, became kind of the guy in control of what it has now become with iRacing today. So
that's Tom Jones. So it was a role-playing league with racing involved. Well,
yes, and it was. And I heard some of what you were talking about on the single player, which we're going to get to Assetto Corsa, and it kind of overlaps into the same thing too, because it's like, well, yes, I actually want more role-playing in my single-player career especially, but to an extent, even the IRSR in iRacing is to an extent a little minute version of role-playing. I mean, it's our currency. We just don't think of it as a money amount, you know?
Right. Michael Thompson, I would be interested to have a damage report at the end of the race, including G-forces on the body, to see if you died or not.
Another fine idea.
So, slight tangent to that. Years ago, when I thought I would have some way of making an impact or trying to get into the gaming industry, I thought about becoming a tester, looked into EA, but I had designed, this was clear back, I'm going to guess in like the Forza 2 days, Gran Turismo, maybe 4, 3, I don't know, somewhere in that neighborhood. I had this idea that what I wanted to do was I wanted to have a system like that where there were events you could run. And this is before iRacing. I didn't know anything about all of this stuff. So I wanted to have events you could run and people would pay you would have and you would have a travel fee, you would have a race entry fee, and you would have crash damage fee, and then so on and so forth. You could build your team up, you could get better parts, whatnot, but you could switch between single player and multiplayer. So in other words, there was always one race. Let's say it's a GT. Back then it would have been a GT1 race at whatever. Let's say Spa. And you could decide if you wanted to do a single player offline race or a multiplayer online race. And the rewards would be scaled based on, what difficulty and or what race
Right.
with a ranking system that you got into.
Right.
So I had all these ideas about how to I always liked those systems that gave you a hook. It's the same thing that I say about Gran Turismo. Back in the day, the hook was you didn't have a bunch of access. You did have access to the internet, but there were still secrets.
Right.
And it was like, what am I going to unlock this time when I win this race or this championship? And then you win. And then when you win it again, especially like with Gran Turismo 2, and it had the shadow of 4 cars, and it was like a slot machine, and you had to try to kind of time it to get it to stop. The idea was to continually give you a hook to run that race again to see what other car you could get. And like doing the license test, like when I won my first car in a license test, I had no idea that I was going to get a car for the license test.
Right.
So that's what I miss some of those elements. As we've gone down the line, we've made things more accessible, and I think that's fine. But I think we've also run away from people being invested in something. That's just everything becomes a throwaway. Well, now that's done, I can just go over here. I miss the days of going through those things, and that's probably just the generation that I grew up in. People don't want to do that now, and that's fine. But I would also argue that that's what single race or make your own championship or whatever is for.
Right.
And then you also have multiplayer, and people don't want the same, and they shouldn't have those same restrictions when you want to go play multiplayer. Those things should be available.
I have to tell you what, in the world of shooters, it pisses me off as much or more than it does in sim racing. But like, I have always been a huge fan of storyline shooter games. And, with various reasons baiting you in to keep going, promotions, bigger weapons, whatever. And then at some point, and I don't know what the hell happened, but, and I can't even remember the name of that first shooter. It wasn't Call of Duty. It was one that like almost had zero. It was like the first one. It was like almost a broken game out of the gate, but it had like incredibly great elements of fighting. So people were playing it anyway. There was like no single player mode.
You're not talking about like a Counter-Strike or something like that, are you?
I don't think it was Counter-Strike. I shouldn't bring things up if I can't remember them. It just makes me look bad. But it had really cool music, and it was really good multiplayer fighting, but there was almost no storyline to it at all. And I was like, man, it's such a disappointment to me because I don't always feel like multiplayer environment is controlled enough to give me what I want in that world. Like, I'm sorry, but I don't want to be spawn fodder, just because I'm new to the game. How about I get a fighting chance or get put in a room with people of like skill, not some idiot who just likes having 100 kills against people of no hope. And I feel like the racing games have followed the same tradition, but it's like for some reason the world, and this is me getting old, doesn't demand that, and I listen to your videos on Assetto Corsa Competizione, and I'm thinking along with you as you're saying, we'll come back to that, but
right. I like what Mike from Sim Racing 604, the hook for me, I believe he's talking about Gran Turismo was the upgrades.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
That was kind of part of it.
In iRacing, I don't know if people realize this, and it probably would do them better service to, focus on a little. Your iRating is a currency, and when you get into a ranked room, a racing room for points,
okay,
you are putting your iRating into the pot for that average number that is the strength of field.
Okay, All right. I
Now
see
it's
where
a
you're going.
skill-based odds system. They don't call it odds, but the odds are there. It's just in the form of an logarithm. But if I'm a 2600 I rating and I jump into a room with an 1800 I rating, that means that there are actually people with only maybe a 1000 I rating in the same room, right? That's how we're at that I rating in the middle, medium point. Well, that's how much I put in the same pool, the same pot for the total rewards at the end, you
Okay.
know? And then because I put in more, or I'm like it, just like horse odds. Well, if I'm the 1-to-1 horse, man, I have to win, or I basically am a failure, as far as money and points goes.
Mm-hmm.
But those long shot guys, they just kind of have to place, and it was a
Right.
killer
They have
day
more to
for
gain.
them.
Yeah.
But I don't think people think of it in that terms, but it's exactly the same. That is how the point system works. It's exactly how the point system works. But they don't do it in a way that really baits me, because it's just this IR number. I get my simple little data at the end, and it's like, whatever.
Yeah. We'll get. You're right, and we'll get to that when we get to the ACC thing, because it's kind of it all kind of coalesces in one particular point.
Yeah. So anyway, with some tangents, that's what I did this week. I love the trucks.
They are super fun. They are. I couldn't believe how much fun, like right out of the box, I was having with them. Like, this is fantastic. One thing that I found that was interesting is, you know how you can adjust your view in iRacing,
Mm-hmm.
where you do what is it? Control F12 in a replay, go in and you can change your height, your tilt, your
Everything,
back,
yeah.
forth, everything. Well, they added essentially two of the functions that you would do in the Control F12 to the main menu, which is fantastic. But it's a global, it's not per vehicle.
Oh, right.
And so I tried using that. I was like, oh, well, this is cool. I don't have to go in and do the Control F12 thing anymore. And so the trucks, you kind of have like a different view angle than a lot of the cars. So
Yeah.
I was changing it. And then when I went to go run, I think it was I want to say it was like the Mustang or whatever, the stock car. Like my view was all jacked, because even though I had separate controls, it seemed to remember my prior settings. And no matter what car I went to, including other cars that I had already made sure that weren't new,
Right.
it seemed to just keep whatever setting I had prior. I was like, well, that kind of defeats the purpose for me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to have to still go into Control F12, make all these 0, because I want it per car. I don't want it. It was really bizarre.
Yeah, that
I could
is
not
bizarre.
get it to hold per individual vehicle.
So you're essentially still better off going with the Alt F12, where you can save a camera per car, right?
Right.
And then that becomes your default cockpit view
for that particular car, which I really like, even though it's obscured in that manner, which I think is silly. I thought this was like a way to be able to, change my height, change my horizon level, which is what they're talking about, the tilt.
Right.
I thought that was great. And then I was like, it doesn't save it per vehicle, even though I have the checkbox at the bottom that says, individual controls for each car.
Right.
Like, well, it's kind of a bummer.
That is a bummer. I find, and that's not something that affects me, because I find, because I'm streaming in a different car all the time, that I'm constantly moving my view to suit the stream as much as my driving. People have no idea how much my driving is compromised by the fact that I do this show. If this show got turned off and I focused on one discipline, man, I think I'd be twice as good a sim racer.
Right? Yeah, control or concentrate on one thing.
Yeah, but I am all over. Ooh, that computer goes to sleep. And I hope it doesn't do anything stupid to us, because that is holding my cameras where they belong. Sorry.
Alt F12, yes. I kept saying control. I always get confused which one, because I think the other one's like Control K or I don't know. It's something.
Alt K is how you move your menus around in the driving view.
That's right.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to the news, and then we're going to come back to some other conversation. despite as of today me not advocating the purchase of any Codemasters games. No. I'm going to get sued.
Perfect.
No, but I actually do love all these titles. That's again why it was such a sore subject. But a huge sale right now. Virtually everything from Codemasters is on sale. So Dirt Rally 2.0 Deluxe Edition, which includes Season 1, Season 2 updates, is 50% off, so half off. But here's the biggies. Dirt Rally, if you've never tried it, never did any of them, 80% off. So that's almost giveaway. Dirt 4, 80% off. Dirt 4 is one of my all-time favorite games, I have to admit. F1 2018, also one of my all-time favorite. Dirt 4, yeah. Actually,
you sure about that?
The original Dirt was one of my all-time favorite games.
Okay, I was going to say Dirt 4.
No, Dirt. It was the original Dirt because it was a game changer.
Okay.
You know, it like nobody had done that yet to that degree, in my opinion.
I would agree with that. Okay.
So, F1 2018, 75% off. That's a pretty darn good game for that price, I have to, if your pedals work. And On Rush, 80% off as well. Order Shaun to return all products. No, I keep giving him money, hoping they'll fix the basics, you know. Codemasters and Fnatic issue a new ban on Shaun Cole. Oh, yes, the list gets longer. Shaun.
Welcome to the club.
Blacklisted Cole. All right. So that's it from Codemasters, really. I mean, we already talked about the liveries for 19. We already talked about the night lighting, which I thought was really awesome. So, next up, you want this one?
Let's see. Is this the Simbin one?
Yeah.
Just an interesting photo. Actually, Shaun has more thoughts about this than I do. Just they finally got a podium at the Simbin Studios.
What took them so long?
I like their hashtag Simbin UK, but then GTR3, and it's coming. I just like to know when.
When? What?
What are we? You said it before the show. They promised us more information, but when?
Nothing. They've not said. That was like months ago that they made a post saying, "Hey, you guys have been asking for more. We've been really bad about it. We're gonna start giving you more info." Here we are, months later, and nothing other than we know they took delivery of a podium wheel. Wonder how much it pisses them off to have to see that F1 Esports logo on the box.
Why couldn't that be us?
Because you don't have a game and you don't make any announcements.
We don't know what you're doing.
But they are hiring, you know. I mean, so that's good. They're building up a team. They have offices, apparently.
I mean, they just had to get the funds together to grab the podium.
I wonder what GTR3's niche would be. I mean, GTR, well, it's the R, I guess. It's not GT3R. It's GTR3. I was going to say, I wonder how it plays up against the Assetto Corsa. Or is it like going to be like directly competing sims? But we don't know.
I mean, yeah, we don't know what, if they're focusing on a singular series or if they're going to be more encompassing, because like the original GTR games that was based on the FIA stuff.
Right.
So,
and that's
then they kind of
going back in time.
Like did a couple different, right? They did a couple different, what was it? The classes within that, and did some of the special races. Because I think they did have like a 24 hours of spa race or something like that in there that was official beyond all the modding stuff that you could do to it.
Right. Right.
But yeah, that
was their wheelhouse, was sort of that GT3 type car that was before the split, we'll call it, because Simbin, you know, now we're going way back. So Simbin, that was Ian Bell with Simbin.
Right. Yeah, they diverged and
then he blocked them from the use of the title or even building anything, it seems, for a decade. And now they're back with GTR3, but are they going to be back? And then their other partner was Henrik Roos. The guy who drove, you probably are a huge fan of him. He was a Viper racer. He was whatchamacallit batteries, Optima Batteries Viper from
really?
FIA GT racing back in the day. He was like a super winning driver, you know.
I had no idea.
Yeah, and that was it was him with Ian Bell were the partnership for GTR prior to the split, which then became SImbin. Need for Speed, I guess, is where Ian went first before
Yes,
Project
I
Cars.
think that's right.
And then aren't part of Race Room, isn't that part of that split also?
Right. So they went. It just kind of
Yeah, like
split off, and that's how. Because they had all the like the WTCC stuff,
right,
Race 07.
right.
So I think that was after the split, if I'm not mistaken.
It was. It was. That's when they started going away from that GT3 and into more all over the place content. So, okay, cool. Fun walks down memory lane. I'm glad I'm young enough to still remember my history.
Wow. That's a nice way of putting it, isn't it?
It is. I'm afraid for the future. All right, so I don't know this new way I'm saying Sue.
Sue?
Yeah,
Sue.
I'm getting some weird accent that I've created. So, earlier in the week, I had another little rant, and this was about the Le Mans Esports series for Forza. And they had some qualifier racers and things, and the 10 teams, all but 2 of the teams were filled through racing, and then they left 2 spots open for wild card entries. So in the last couple days, we've seen 2 teams that have been given those wild card entries. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to name the 2 teams, and then I'd like your thoughts, Billy, on what they've done. I'd like your guys' thoughts on these teams, and should these be the 2 teams, and what do you think of this? But so they've now announced that SMP Racing will be contesting the Le Mans Esports Series final, so they're the first of the 2 wild card entries. Down here lower, like Stephen Hood, who I know Stephen, he comes from F1 2010. Partner with Paul Giles, the heads of that game way back when. He's now president of Motorsport Games, said SMP Racing is a highly recognized partner in endurance racing, and it's fantastic to welcome both their credibility and simultaneously provide them with an opportunity to compete in the LMES Super Final. So that's one team, and they're from Russia. The other team is Veloce, who's a team that I know their name, but how and why. Veloce has also high-profile customer teams, they're calling them, in Sauber Esports and Fernando Alonso's FA Racing Esport team. So they didn't qualify, but they were given the invite anyway. What do you think? I mean, you come from a real-life racing background. I used the word provisional. It wasn't provisional. What's the word in NASCAR they gave you? Or the one who remembered the right word?
They're provisionals.
Provisional. I think. I was calling them exemption. They're provisionals.
Yeah, and I chimed in. I was being funny and called them provisionals because that's what it reminds me of.
Yes.
I think you lose. I understand from a promoter's aspect. So this is nothing new. This has been around in regular motorsports for decades, and literally decades. I can tell you, coming from the dirt track, the sprint car world, promoters would pay guys to show up. And that brought other teams, and that brought the fans. And most people didn't quite understand that. Your average fan didn't know that was going on. It's like, no, they're getting paid. Not only are they getting the prize purse at the end, they're getting paid to show up. Unlike the mid-pack and back-end teams, they're not getting paid to show up.
Right.
So with that, because the promoter either had a good relationship with that team or driver, or they wanted to ensure that the fan favorites were in the big show.
Right.
Then they would pull a promoter's option, or what kind of later became coined in NASCAR as a provisional, which used to be just a championship provisional. And that to me always seemed shady is not the right word, because there's really nothing unethical about it. I mean,
right.
That's kind of smart business, right?
Sure.
You're ensuring that the fans get what they want.
Club
and you're
owners do
ensuring
it.
that the fans, yeah, you're ensuring that the fans will come because that they know that so and so is coming to race this weekend at whatever speedway.
Mm-hmm.
But what it always kind of did to me was take away a little bit of the, can you imagine if so and so didn't make the show? Or like they're
Right.
or they're battling epically from deep within the B main or qualifying. I mean, think about Indy 500. And we never got to talk about this, but one of the big things about Indy is them changing potentially to give the regular teams guaranteed spots in the 500, and then just a handful of spots are open to everybody else. That changes the drama and the excitement, though,
Sure.
of what could happen. I mean, remember, a lot of people won't, but there was a year where one of the best in the business, Bobby Rahal, didn't make the 500.
Sure. Or
And it was a
Alonso
big,
this year with McLaren didn't make it.
exactly. And that's so relating this back, I think you hit the nail on the head with, if it's an invitational, then make it an invitational. If it's performance based, then let's make it a performance based thing and make the drama about qualifying for the event.
Right.
Because I just think some of the magic gets lost about, yeah, I know so and so is going to make it. I remember, going back to the Indy 500, what about the year that Penske, one of the most dominant teams that were there, they couldn't make the field.
Right.
That's a bit. So can you imagine Team Red? I'm not using them as an example that they're a terrible team. I'm using them as an example of being an amazing team.
Right.
Them battling their way in, and it's between Team Redline and this no-name team, and the no-name team makes it in, and Team Redline doesn't. Think of the drama, and the no-name team gets a big shout out because now they're the ones that kept Team Redline from getting in. I don't know. I just think that
now they're the Cinderella story, right? I mean, we have terms for these things even because these are how the greatest stories are written. The greatest story was never written with, oh, and he got a provisional into the race or he wouldn't have even been there. You know, that is not how the greatest story ever was written. You know, the greatest story is that he broke in the qualifier and had to race the all through the heats and almost didn't even get through the second heat, you know, but there he was on the final grid spot of the final and he got by everybody and won the, you know, that is the story written of the greatest race. And it's just, you know, so yeah, I think, and then the other thing for me that really I think bothers me even more, like when I think of the word provisional, for me, growing up in North America, it really was NASCAR was the big one.
Right.
And they had their champions provisional, and you think like a Terry Labonte. You know, no offense, I was actually a Terry Labonte fan, but there were a couple of years at the end where the only reason Terry Labonte was in a handful of races was because of a champions provisional.
Well, Tom Jones just mentioned Darrell Waltrip, same thing.
Yeah. And so that's where but to me, sim racing esport isn't old enough or sophisticated enough to give anybody, including Redline, a provisional. Because even though I'll be the first person to say, here we are on planet Earth, Team Redline is the best sim racing team on Earth, I still believe. Other teams are starting to rival them, but they are still consistently the team. But that still doesn't, in my mind, get them a provisional in something that's only 3 years old. You know, their reign in the world of esport isn't significant enough to deserve any of that. On the other hand, you hit it on the head, and this goes back to like what Austin was talking about on esport. They have to get bang for their buck for this whole thing to work. They have to get enough return on their investment for doing these events. And part of it is having the right people there from an entertainment perspective.
And that's fine. I don't mind that somebody, you know, I think John Hill sent me the article from Kotaku about the bubble with esports. And there's some really large concern, and not just sim racing, even though sim racing is one of the fastest growing. There's some big concern that these companies are getting sold a bill of goods where there is no goods to actually give them anything, because they kind of equated it to sporting events. You got to sell the tickets. Well, they're not really selling the tickets. They'll get a lot of people watching, but as far as actually selling tickets, they're not really selling a lot of tickets to warrant the prize pool. So it's all a marketing push. And how long does that marketing push last when they don't see the return on investment? And they're getting outside investors then saying, oh, well, it's worth this much.
Right.
When there's really no data to support that's actually how much it's worth.
No, it's very much on
Coca-Cola,
speculation.
yes. So Coca-Cola and these other sponsors get involved, saying, well, wow, they've got all this money involved, all these people are watching, and all these people are buying whatever. There is a very real and very large concern. And to a degree, I don't know how much this affects our area of esports, because we are really a marketing push, not just for the game company themselves, but external forces like series like FIA, WRC. Well, I should have said F1, but NASCAR. You have external pushes now from car manufacturers like Toyota pushing to get these esports into a place. So it becomes, like I said, I don't know how much it affects the esports side of us, but on the sim racing side of us in esports, but esports as a whole, there is a legit concern that the bottom will drop out because these investors are not seeing the return on the investment.
Sure. When Coca-Cola gets behind a Call of Duty tournament, it's an advertising. Sure, they want return on their investment, but like, they don't need Call of Duty. It's just another of many advertising opportunities.
Right.
We are so directly tied to the automotive world, so directly tied to the racing world, that it goes beyond just putting a banner up or having a name recognition like Coca-Cola on a Call of Duty tournament. But now those affiliations are building fan base for the marquees, for the racing series themselves, for an industry that, whether you say it's already in decline or the writing is on the wall, that the corporate execs at all of these companies and entities are aware that their timeline could be peaked. Because how long will we be in cars? How long will we be in gas-burning vehicles? How long is, racing is in decline in North America. I mean, that's pretty solid. I mean,
it's been like that for a while.
Yeah, I mean, IndyCar's actually rising from how bad they'd been beaten down to. But I don't think...
Same thing. Sprint cars have seen a resurgence in, I would say, the last 3 to 4 years.
Maybe it's a distribution of market share that's happened. Maybe more than a decline, it's a restructuring where people are like, you know what? We're done paying $100 for NASCAR tickets. We're bored and it's too much money.
Again, an overvalued product.
Yeah.
To a degree.
If it was $50, maybe we're still in. Hey, for $50, I can still take, my wife and one kid. Well, the other kid's got to stay home, but...
That hits a whole nother argument where, is that because a series loses its way? Is that because the fans have naturally changed over time? Is that because you forgot what your core fan base wanted and you tried to get these other fans? And so there's all these different factors. I do find it interesting that IndyCar, of all the series, has had a big resurgence. I mean,
yeah, and on what? Like what is different, right? I mean,
I just think that they got away from the ugly cars.
Yeah, they fixed the car from its original release, for sure.
I think F1 has not done itself any favors with the sound that the cars produce.
Yep.
The
parade racing,
especially this year, is not as good as IndyCar.
Nope. 200-mile parade.
Well, and what always kind of blows me away was F1 was supposed to be the proving ground in my eyes of technology, and each team could come in with their own idea. Now I understand that money has played a big factor, but it kind of, to a degree, it always has.
Mm-hmm.
So back in the day, you had all these different ideas. Remember when you had the different engine
Right.
configurations and almost a brand's identity was built upon the engine that they were using. And so Formula, I think, has become more homogenized over the years. And I think that does take away a little bit. That's why I quit watching,
Sure. Especially
because
then
that series to me is not, there is innovation, but from the fans' perspective, you don't really get to see or understand a lot of that innovation. It's all these little tiny arrow things now.
right.
And I just find that between the engine noise and stuff, like, yeah, it's not the same as I want it to be, where IndyCar has become a spec series, essentially, which I find is funny because so is F1, but the racing, the sound is better. The racing itself is better. So I don't, it's such a bizarre one because to a degree, they're almost the same thing. It's just one's got a different idea as to what it wants to appeal to in their fan base as the other one.
I think total dominance and any rule package that allows for total dominance ends up, if it's left unchecked, leads to boredom. So, like in the days of Formula One, when it was really an engineering game, what can you develop and bring to the game that changes things? And then you get a team that was just untouchable for a year because they came up with something so brilliant, which still goes on a little bit, but it's such tighter that it's sort of like, okay, yes, this is the A car, B car, C car, D car. Whereas you look at IndyCar right now, and like, yeah, you could pick 3 or 4 guys at any given weekend who look good for the win. But like, you have no idea who's going to win an IndyCar race before it begins. Like, you just
Well,
don't.
look
I
at
mean,
when Connor Daly won over at Circuit of the Americas.
yeah. And
That was not, that was a wild card, basically.
I think that's fun. I think that makes for
Yeah.
entertainment. And then sure, there was drama in the Monaco Formula One race, but it was almost like, let's kind of build some sub-drama and act like it's actual drama. Because the reality was, well, no, we had our typical parade. Now, Monaco's a bad example, because actually Monaco, if everybody's factors had been the same at a different track, it would have been an exciting race. But at Monaco, it was going to end up exactly how it ended up.
Right.
If that had been a normal track, Max Verstappen would have made the pass. He would have gained the advantage, and you would have had a total upside down thing where, Mercedes actually didn't win.
I forgot. It's Colton Herta, not Con. I got Connor Daly stuck on the brain because I read an article with him the other day, but it was Colton Herta. Yes, the 88. I remember the car, just not the right driver.
Oh, speaking of IndyCar, want another tangent?
Uh-oh.
I actually read on Jalopnik. I have a hated driver. So this Ferrucci character. Ferrucci character is just another rich punk driver. He's got skills. He's got mad driving skills, by the way. I'm not trying to... but Jalopnik hammered not only this guy, but he hammered NBC. So this is the good, and I did get it right when I was reading the story last week. Not on him getting... But... he was in the Indy 500, and NBC, like, Dale Earnhardt was like, I don't know how you can't be a huge fan of this guy. And I'm just like, my head's about to explode. Now I'm like, I hate you now, Dale. I love Dale Earnhardt Jr., and now I hate you too. No, but it was like NBC was going out of the way because they wanted another American-born hero to root for, Rookie of the Year, much like when Rossi came back into IndyCar. The only problem is this guy's a piece of shit and doesn't deserve anything. And they should, I'm sorry, but one apology doesn't correct a whole career of being an idiot. And you're just a spoiled brat. And Dale Coyne Racing, I hate you too, because you know what? There are a lot of people who will write a check. Anyway, but thank you, Jalopnik, for backing me on this one, because I feel like I'm a little bit out on a limb being so vocally against somebody like that. But anyway, So,
Awesome.
um,
All right. I have no feelings one way or the other because I don't even know what the problem is. So I couldn't tell you.
he had like his teammate in Formula 3 was a foreigner. I don't remember what country, but he many times was caught saying like totally racist statements totally towards his
Oh,
coach.
okay.
And
All right.
then he crashed that guy out of another race on purpose. And then he got caught reading a text while driving down pit lane on a hot track. Like like not during practice when it was just him and his team. This was a hot track and he's holding a cell phone in the cockpit of a Formula 3 car, and I'm just like, dude, you do not accept responsibility for others in this dangerous sport. You crashed your teammate on purpose. You're going down pit lane where guys who get paid $35,000 a year jumping over that wall and will not be loved forever because you hit them. They'll be forgotten forever because you hit them, and you're
Right.
texting on your phone. So no, I'll never lay off of that guy. F you, Dale Coyne. F you, Ferrucci. And Dale Earnhardt, you
Perfect.
better watch it too. And NBC, you better watch it. I'll be F-Uing you guys as well. I'm going to give you guys a pass.
In
It was
Dale
a
Jr.'s
one-time.
defense, I don't think he knew that then. I didn't either. And I thought the same thing. I'm like, look at this guy come through the field. And then I see all the people getting mad. I'm like, why is everybody in an uproar about this guy? He's making great moves on the track. I agree with Dale. So I didn't know any of that.
He's a good
But
driver.
yeah,
I will not take that away from him. He's a really good driver. He really is.
yeah, but no, it doesn't excuse the other stuff then.
All right. Assetto Corsa.
On from one to the next.
So I'm going to play a video. I should make sure it's muted.
Oh,
do I have
wow.
your permission to play your video?
I guess so.
Okay, so this I just have it playing so people can see what we're talking about. Billy did 2 different videos, and I played my share of Assetto Corsa Competizione, and I know a lot of you guys out there did as well. Billy, wow, 6,000 views on part 1. Nicely done. Assetto Corsa Competizione, initial impressions. And before the show, people were hoping for a Billy rant today. I'd almost say that if you want a uncondensed version of a Billy rant, go watch part 1 and part 2 of Assetto Corsa Competizione Initial. I saw your blood boil over at one point. So
That's a fair statement.
let's talk Assetto Corsa. You did 2 videos that I think really summarized a lot of the thoughts of the community in a really well done way, because you were obviously not trying to
I appreciate that.
hate
I'll send you the
them.
$100 later.
No, but it was obvious that I think you were coming from the same standpoint that I would have come from, which is, man, I want to love this. Here's a great game by a great pedigree or heritage, sim line. I like GT3 car. Well, you're not a big fan of GT3 cars, are you?
Oh no, I mean I like GT3. It's fine.
Okay. But you really were approaching it from this is the next version from a great line. I want to love it. And then you just seem to keep running into these little things, sometimes big things, that were really preventing you from saying, I love this game. So can you summarize some of your thoughts? Devin Booth asked us to kind of talk about your videos.
Yeah, we had a few people, and I think the idea, them asking was obviously for me to elaborate, or if I've come to any different conclusions. But I also think they wanted to know either your take on if you had played any more, or your take on what I was saying. Like if there was things in there that kind of made you either have a difference of opinion or why you would agree with them. I think that's what they were kind of looking for. So I guess to summarize, to begin with, we had talked a few weeks ago on the show about how I felt like I needed to change direction on what I was doing. And I just realized that maybe trying to do some sort of documentation process different from other people was perhaps beneficial. I was trying to find a way to get information to people in my own way. And I felt like maybe doing the talk and drive things wasn't accomplishing what I thought and felt like it was supposed to accomplish. So I decided, all right, when something new comes out that I want to cover, this is how I'm going to go about it. I'm going to start with this way I'm not live streaming it so that because my frustration when I used to live stream is I would try and do that and then I'd say something incorrect that I would find later, that's wrong.
Right.
So
And
doing a
sometimes
video
it's
this
just a
way,
slip of the tongue. Sometimes it's an
yes.
actual mistake, but sometimes it's just a slip of the tongue too.
So rather than not putting out correct information, for me, this is just how I wanted to do it. I decided to edit, but chronicle my progress. That way, if I made a mistake, I could get rid of it. And then, there's nothing worse than saying, "Oh, it doesn't have this," and then 5 minutes later, you find the thing that oh, well,
Right.
here it is.
Right.
Well, it's easier just to edit out that I can't find it part, and you sound silly, and go, "Here's where this is the thing I was looking for." Blank. So that's kind of how I did part 1 and part 2. And the idea was to get to a point where I got to the end. I've tried everything that I found important to me that I wanted to try, and then say, here's my final thoughts. And you can decide if this is a title for you or not, because I've showed you everything that I can think of that would be important to somebody purchasing the title.
Yeah.
And so in a really quick synopsis, I went from finding things that I really liked, and then there were things that I didn't understand. It wasn't explaining well, to finding all these points that stopped me from enjoying the game as a whole.
Yep.
And it was, to me, game-breaking things, not the driving. The driving is great. I mean, the load time, one thing I didn't get to mention, the load times are ridiculously fast.
Yeah. Yeah, they are.
I mean, if you want to talk about something impressive that doesn't seem like it should be that big a deal, it loads incredibly quick. I really like the way the cars drive. I happen to be fine with the force feedback, but I also explained why I could understand other people would not like the force feedback, because it's so personal what force feedback does. And it was funny because I was watching a stream yesterday with Gamer Muscle, and he talked about how we differed in ACC on the force feedback. Okay. And he said, my opinion wasn't wrong, but neither was his. And I agree with that. So there's all these things that I really like in ACC. The problem is the implementation, the ideas behind what they've got going on. Who did you make this for?
Right. Well, and that's the thing that I always try to identify in my head before I review, is that question, because then I can grade it based on how well they delivered for who it was made for, which is the only relevant thing to me. But if it's hard to identify that person, that makes it even more difficult. If it looks like a duck, smells like a duck, barks like a duck, it's a duck, right? And it's like, well, if it looks like it's a hardcore sim, and if it feels like it's a hardcore sim, shouldn't it be a hardcore sim?
Right.
And I'm not saying whether it is or isn't. I'm just saying as an example, it's like, that's kind of for me how I'm trying to break down and identify a title as a reviewer. I have not played it enough more. I played it a little more since my 2 experiences. When I watched mainly the part 2 video, I actually started to grow really frustrated, because we just a couple weeks ago had that topic of, okay, here's your new sim. Now what do you do with it? Right? Like, how can you enjoy this sim? Gran Turismo has great multiplayer, but as we say all the time, it was that career mode that baited me. Why do I love Gran Turismo? Multiplayer would not even make my top 5 reasons why I love Gran Turismo. I can easily give you 5 other reasons that I love Gran Turismo before I get to multiplayer. So I found myself getting frustrated, because what I look at is, well, with the matchmaker announcements that were made, seeing the game come out and seeing, okay, it's kind of like Assetto Corsa. Okay, I have some community events. That's a huge bonus. That I'll enjoy. That I'm going to love. That I'm going to give them a huge pat on the back. Community events, leaderboard challenges, things like that are going on. Like, whenever I fire up a sim and I see this week's challenge, I'm excited. I like that in Project Cars too, immensely. However, the multiplayer, I'm still in that, well, what am I going to do? I still need to find myself a decent league. I still need to find myself an SRS or something like that being built to create a third-party environment that creates the racing mentality that I'm looking for. And then it comes back to what I was so optimistic for after all these weeks of seeing that button saying career mode. You know, big old image. It's not even like on project come on, Shaun. On Assetto Corsa regular, sorry.
Okay.
On Assetto Corsa regular, it's just a little heading at the top, career, right? It's like underplayed. On this one, it's this big on the UI, career. And then when I'm hearing yours, and it's like, oh, I'd already seen in that first 3 stages of the career mode that it was a little, like when I was on the track, I enjoyed the career mode, like the challenges and things that were there.
Right.
I enjoyed the scoring and the rating and all that, but what I didn't enjoy was that how it just didn't do anything to make me want to hit go again. You know, and that in a career mode is really essential. So I think that was one of the things that I've been very, very optimistic about for the game. Like right now, here's how I feel. I mean, I can nutshell Assetto Corsa, and I think somebody else wrote it almost exactly. The on-track driving in Assetto Corsa makes me very happy. Like, yes. I'm enjoying that fine line. Like, as much as I'm a huge iRacing guy, I'm the first person to say it's ice racing. It's so hard to understand, get that control level within the sim. iRacing, as much as it's one of my favorites, they've made it harder than real life racing by 10 times more difficult. Like if you can iRace it. Any car in real life is going to feel like a basic car. iRacing makes real life cars, everything's now a Miata, because you've learned the true skill of driving on the edge. I think Assetto Corsa did such a great job of giving me a car that gets that really good balance of, you know what? You've got this incredible racing machine with incredible tires. And up to 90% of its ability, it can do it all day long without even screeching a tire. Like, all the way up to about 90% of its performance ability. But that last 10 is now sacred. And even that last 5 is near impossible to do well. But that, 90 through 95% of its performance ability, now you're really on the edge. And you're like, oh, this thing's a machine, and I got to watch my ass a little bit. And I love that because I feel like, wow, I think that's in the ballpark of modern era racing, and that I could go get a GT3 car and push it up to in real life and push it to like 90% and do just fine. Like, everybody be like, dude, you did great. You ran a 103. That's not bad, Right. And then the minute I start trying to get into that next 5, I'm gonna loop it on entry with some over braking on trail braking. I'm gonna throttle over, steer it, hitting the curb, trying to get a little too. And I just found that Assetto Corsa was doing that to me really, really well, and I really enjoyed in the car the sounds, the graphics. The graphics are not as good as I thought they were. I thought they were a little more spectacular, but they're really awesome. It's just I thought they were maybe the next gen, and no, maybe they're not quite the next gen. They're just really, really good graphics. The sounds were really amazing. But it's such a bummer to hear that the career mode might be lackluster, because I was like, oh, this is going to be something that's going to like bait me for a while, and I'm going to be tempted. And, like right here, it's showing the total rating, and I'm like, oh, that's awesome. I love that stuff. I love having my driving broken down by a sim. And being held to a criteria that I don't hold myself to. So I loved all of these factors, but then just little things that were taking away from the success of those ideas, if that makes sense.
No, I mean, yes, that makes total sense. And so just kind of going through the chat here and just kind of picking up on things people are talking about. One of them was the input lag. I found that it depended on the car, but what I found more was it's the visual lag. So one of the things that I always kind of struggle with is it input lag or is it visual lag? And visual lag in the sense that sometimes the steering wheel is not rendered the same way as everything else, right? So sometimes you won't have input lag, but you will get a visual lag from the
Right.
steering wheel. So the way to eye test that is then turn the steering wheel off, because I was noticing some cars more than other, there was at least a visual lag in the steering wheel on the screen.
Was
And
it
I
trying?
know a
I
lot of
can't
people.
remember. Was it visually trying to do 900 or was it stopping at
No, what it would do
360?
is I would turn and then on the screen it would turn.
Okay.
So that can give you the impression of input lag. But if you get rid of the steering wheel, I really didn't notice any input
You
lag.
didn't feel an input
I didn't
lag. You just were
feel, now
visually
not
seeing.
saying that there isn't, but I didn't feel any.
And it's certainly not as pronounced as what you were seeing between the wheel on screen and
Correct.
your
Because
wheel.
that's what was really throwing me off. And so that can be a visual thing. People are having problems with VR, obviously not true triple screen support.
Right.
I've heard mixed things about VR. Some people are fine, some people are not. Menus have an issue, that kind of thing. My main point in all of it was, at least in the first video, I really liked what was going on as far as the driving was concerned and how I always approach stuff, whether it be sim racing or any other game that I can get online with. I always do the single player or career to get an understanding of how I need to operate. What do I need to do? Get familiar with all the tricks and the buttons and whatever. So in sim racing, I like to figure out what car I like, what tweaks I need to make. And then once I'm done with that, then I go online.
Right.
That's just my personality. That's how I like to approach things. And so to me, there was an inherent value in showing off what could be done for a career mode or a single player. And again, I go back to the stat that was said by Kunos, I don't know, a couple of years ago now. I haven't seen one since, but I think it was like 50% of their player base played single player offline stuff.
Right.
Not offline, but you know what I'm saying? They
Yep.
they did not engage in a multiplayer race.
Yeah.
That's a large part of your market. Now, whether it's shifted a little more since then, I don't know. I've seen some other stats from other people that say it's roughly about 60-40, 55-45. So, but it's in that range. That's still a significant chunk of your audience. So I felt like it was important that I go through something that this is what I would be doing regular.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mind quality when it's version 1.0. I don't mind quality of life improvements that need to happen. For instance, it's a little frustrating that you don't know what those points mean
Right.
when you're doing it.
Right.
Right? The rating system does all these different things. That's a one whole system that it does explain, but it kind of doesn't give you like a really good reference to why you care.
Right.
Until you realize that there's parts that are for multiplayer and it can cross over between single and multiplayer. Okay. There's a whole nother system
But
in
it
like
would
the
be
career
nice
mode.
because if you're doing your single player and you're also concerned about other aspects, you actually want to know how to build those points up in particular, perhaps.
Right.
So you need to know how the system works. I mean, like, again, using iRacing, it's a different system, but you know exactly what affects your safety rating. And you know exactly how it's measured, and you know exactly what it affects in the game. Same thing with the iRating. You know exactly how it works. You don't know the logarithm, but you know how it works. And you know how those points are used in the game and how it affects your daily driving. It's very, very
Right.
clear. So anyway, okay, go on. Sorry. I just wanted to
No, it's
make
fine.
that comparison.
So once you kind of figure out that part, there's really only a couple things that you need to pay attention to that really affect what you're doing. But I don't mind those other things because it's kind of like a leveling. It gives you an idea where you're at. I actually kind of wish it was more prominent, to be honest with you, because it does do a good job of telling you where you're deficient and where you're doing well on a track.
Right. I enjoyed that a ton.
I actually found myself pre-release, kind of getting familiar with what was going on, I found myself doing that, going through and seeing where I wasn't as fast, where I could improve, and where I was actually doing really well. I liked that idea. I thought it's actually a good tool. When you get to the career, they don't do a good job of explaining what's going on. So it's not a championship.
Right.
But it doesn't tell you that. So I didn't figure that out until video number 2, from 7 to 18 hours is what the video's for, because it doesn't tell you. But I think what they're doing is they're just giving you some races to kind of get you used to sprint racing, and then they're giving you another set of races to endurance. Now, they don't tell you at the end of 5 or 6 races you're automatically going to go to endurance, or you have to hit a certain level with the points that they're giving you to make that next level. That's where we talk about it earlier. They're not, the communication is terrible in this thing. It just doesn't do a good job of communicating why you're doing what you're doing at all.
Right.
So you look at these points and they're just random points happening. You're like, I don't know why I should care about what's happening here. And there's no, because it's not a championship, but if you were expecting it to be a championship, which I think most people would be, there's no championship points. It doesn't tell you like where you are in the standings, nothing.
Right.
Well, that's not what it's trying to do, but it doesn't tell you that. So all those things, those little small things that can be fixed, right? Those are quality of life things that you could make this better to let us know how to, you could get us to be more informed so we don't have so many questions as we're going.
Right.
Although I think it's silly that it doesn't explain it, I don't mind that that's in a 1.0 version and they can patch that in. They can fix that. What I don't care for is the things that break a game where you go through and it doesn't save.
Right. Right.
And it just kicks you out.
Yeah, I heard that part of your video.
You won't get your points. Why?
Right.
Why did I not get points? There's things where I decided, well, it gets to the point where you get to the endurance races and you have to run 3 qualifying sessions. So the difference between sprint and career is not just the length of race, but you have a race 1 and a race 2 in the sprint, and you qualify for both of those. I understand that. When you get to endurance, you're supposed to have 3 qualification rounds, and theoretically speaking, each qualification round, if I understand it correctly, would be with a different driver on your team. It's a single player career mode. I am one person.
Right.
I don't understand why I have to, and now qualifying sessions are 20 minutes long.
And you're supposed to sit there?
Yes. So the frustrating part was you can't speed up. If you choose to skip, in other words, you go out, you set a couple laps, and then you get to that point, and you're like, okay, I've had enough. I'm going to qualify top 5 of the field or whatever. Let's say you've spent 5 minutes, you made a couple laps, you're done. If you skip, you get the bottom time, and they get an unrealistic time.
Oh my God.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Whereas if I tried it, qualifying session 1, it did that to me. Qualifying session 2, I decided to run, and then I was hungry, and I let it continue going. Well, I outqualified the field by like 2 or 3 seconds. But if you look at the times, but if you look at the times when I skipped, I ran this time. They ran 2 or 3 seconds faster than me. I was like, so I tried it again with qualifying session 3, another 20 minutes. So you spend an hour qualifying. You have another 10-minute practice before that. If you skip any of that, you do not get the points for those sessions.
Right.
Whatever point system it has. Again, I have no idea if it does anything.
So it's not until the end of the entire event that you've achieved whatever you've ranked up, and you're talking about not just a 5-minute, mission.
It says get this point goal. Make sure you complete all the sessions that are prior to the race.
Right.
I'm like, okay. I get to the race, and it doesn't load it changed my setup. It not only didn't load my setup, it actually changed it. It's not the base setup. It wasn't any of those. It just arbitrarily changed my tire pressures, and it arbitrarily changed a couple things that I had, like, that's frustrating.
Yeah.
And then as I was going through, I was running and I was like, wait, what is this? I don't understand what's going on. So there were things that happened when I was running the race. I was like, I'm just going to restart. Now that I understand what it's, because it doesn't do a good job of telling you when you need to pit. You have to pay attention that there's a yellow number. You don't really know what the yellow number is until you, like, I've got an ultra wide. So I have to physically, like, look up to the left and go,
Right.
oh, okay, that's a driver swap. Am I going to get penalized if I don't do a driver swap? Because, again, it doesn't tell you this.
Right.
But I kind of figured, okay, I better do this. Like, I'm going to get penalized. And then what happened was I said, you know what? I'm going to start over. I want to load my correct setup, whatever. And when I did that, it didn't reset the timer for the drivers. So you make one lap after the restart, and 3/4 of the field has to pull into the pits.
Right.
Including yourself. And if you restart it again, it still doesn't reset. It doesn't save in between sessions. And not so much of a big deal in the sprint, but in the endurance,
it's a huge deal.
That's a lot of time to invest to not have a return on anything.
Yeah.
So, and you can't change the AI difficulty. There's all these things that maybe by themselves, they're not that big a deal. Are they game breaking? No. But like I explained, to me, all these things together are game breaking.
Right.
Because I don't want to do this anymore.
Because it's enough to prevent you from even wanting to bother in the end. Right? I mean, because that's the pro versus con, or the time management versus whether I am or not. And it's like, well, if it's broken and I'm not even going to be able to save my progress with the amount of time I have allotted to go play, then there's no point in even turning it on.
Right.
You know, like, hey, I'd like to go forward on my career, but I only have 1 hour. You're like, well, there's no point. You know?
Right.
I can go do a whole practice session and a whole race on iRacing in an hour, but I can't even do one next phase of my career in Competizione in a single player mode.
You can't just do like a I think it's silly that I have to do 3 qualifying sessions.
Yeah.
Because I'm one person. I don't think that's, but again,
and the advanced session should be grounded in some form of reality based on what skill level you're at or you've picked or whatever. And it's like, it needs to be. My brother plays soccer and those basketball games, and I watch him do a lot of that stuff. And I find those games are played by the same thing. So if he gets injured, so they're all these play as one of the player career modes.
Okay, yes.
And so he gets injured. So if he advances time, the scores end up completely, like, not even reflective of every game he's played or watched on the leaderboard when he plays the games to the end. So even the other scores, so he's, you know, soccer as an example, he finishes the game with 1-0 and he looks at the leaderboard of the other games that went on that day, and all the scores were like 1-0 or 2-1 or whatever.
Right.
On the days that he advances, somehow that game finishes like 7-9, and then all the other games are like 13-4, you know, and it's like, why is it so wrong?
Right.
I mean, it's so wrong. And if you're playing a career mode, these are important details, you know?
So I led Billy 2000 GT3 cars are harder to drive in ACC than in iRacing, in my opinion. Well, that's interesting. I find iRacing infinitely more unforgiving than ACC. Like, I can find the limit with ACC much easier than iRacing, but that's a personal preference thing.
I think it's that iRacing's always on the limit, so once you've got it, it's a very consistent car.
True. I don't find GT3 cars very enjoyable in iRacing.
and
GT and GT3.
And I definitely, personally, I thought ACC. But again, my whole thought was that ACC was very easy to drive up to 90%, But as soon as I started to really
It's
try
how those
to,
cars, in my opinion, that's how those cars should be.
yeah, that's how I feel like
Driving
they
a
should
race car
be.
is not incredibly difficult. Theoretically speaking, it's finding that, like you said, that last little bit to make you amazing versus just average.
When like when I Assetto Corsa being our topic of the day, so in that rookie chain challenge, they're like very clear. They want you to drive clean, right? So I'm like, okay,
Yes.
back it down because they were getting really angry if I spun the car or went off track. So I brought it down and I'm like, let's just show them a good driving line and some consistency. But now I was driving fairly slow because I'm like, let's just be very careful. And then they started getting equally as mad at that. It was like, no, you still need to be fast. And then that's when I started finding the cars more difficult to drive. It's like, oh, well, I'm losing to my teammates, right? Because that's what they were comparing my times to, supposedly, or the other
Yeah,
guys.
other people on the track. Yep.
And it's like, well, so now I suck, but I'm all green bar. But now how do I do both? And then all of a sudden, again, a little over trade. Like the initial, I heard you talk about the braking. The braking on these cars is amazing. And you can really use and stand on the brake. Whereas in iRacing, like you have to like use your pinky toe to brake, right?
I, I,
Um,
that was something this is probably a close second would be Automobilista. But the braking in ACC is probably some of the most similar to what I've done in a real race car or racing situations, what have you, than anything, because I have to use the brake. I mean, you got to use it. And I know you can make adjustments to others, and I've done that. So where it doesn't feel quite so sensitive, but the translation just isn't the same. There is a difference in the way, I don't know if it's the throw, what they've done, but to me, this has one of the best feeling brakes. And my brother used to give me a bad time about the sprint car because I was very sensitive with how the brake felt. Like I wanted it to feel a certain way because it inspires confidence.
right.
The brake inspires your confidence in what you can do with the car. So I was very particular about the brake that I want, the feeling that I wanted from the car. This to me feels like that. Like, I can push hard, utilize the brake, but also make small adjustments to correct what the car is doing while I'm under braking. So I really, really like that part. Again, and I really like the way the cars drive. It feels very intuitive to me. I don't think they're too easy. I just think that's GT3 cars.
Sure. Well, you watch a
I just,
GT3 race, and it's like, look at how sticky those cars are. You almost
yeah.
never
And
see a
even when
puff of smoke off a tire, or
some people were saying they had a hard time catching the car. Have had zero issues with catching the car if and when it breaks loose and tries to slide a little bit. I am not having that issue. But if I can understand, if you don't particularly care for the force feedback in the game and you rely on the force feedback to tell you when you're sliding versus I rely on what visually is happening on screen, or like I can already predict, oh, I'm going to be a little too hot. Like I already better be ready to correct what I've done.
right. Yeah, and you know that's going to induce some oversteer because you're still trying to
Right.
play catch up on the corner.
Exactly. So I kind of approach it differently. I'm not saying that's correct or wrong. I'm just saying I know it's just different for a lot of people because a lot of people use the force feedback to let them know what the car is doing.
Sure.
So I can understand that, again, just like GM Gamer Muscle was saying, there's a difference, and I can understand why you wouldn't like it or why you're struggling with it. I like all that. I just find that the rest of it, after 18 hours, I didn't even want to be bothered to try and do the multiplayer. Like my goal was to finish everything. I wanted, because the systems in it are not well explained, I wanted to be able to give people information about, hey, when you make it all the way through career mode, this is what you can expect. This is what you can expect in a championship single race. This is what you can expect multiplayer. Here's all the cars. This is what I liked about all the cars. This is what I didn't. Here's my favorite. Here's my least. Though that's what I was trying to accomplish. But after the 18-hour mark, I was just like, I'm done. I'm so frustrated with how I was listening to, I know I just jumped ship there to a different sentence, but I was listening to a podcast that I listen to quite often called Time Extend. And those guys usually cover arcade racing games, but they do dip into sim racing, and they reminisce about old games, so I like to listen to it. They did a special on Assetto Corsa Competizione, and one of the interesting thoughts that came out was the career mode was okay because they knew that wasn't the focus. And I kind of went, then why bother?
Right.
Why do it at all if you're not going to? You could have just done left just the championship, make your own championship, make your own race weekend, whatever. You could have just left those.
Right.
Why go through the trouble of making a career mode that doesn't make any sense, that doesn't tell you what's going on, that seems haphazard, half-assed, and doesn't work properly? It's broken. You get to these things that don't work. So why go through the trouble? Why spend the time, money, and effort to do something like that instead of focusing on all the other systems? You could have improved bugs, gotten rid of. That's what I meant by at the very beginning of this conversation. I'm not sure who this is for. Right. Is it for a multiplayer audience? Is it for an offline? Because what's funny is I've gotten a really good reception. And yeah, I mean, in part 2, I'm already animated as it is. And then I got frustrated. So then I'm like, it is funny. I mean, somebody gave me the comment that, I sound like a spoiled brat, and that's, I don't think so, but I could understand that is the perception. That's fine. Because, I mean, I'm animated to begin with, and I actually calmed myself down. I was more irritated, and I calmed myself down, actually, because I'm sitting there like, what in the blank? So, I don't know. I played it up for the camera a little bit, but it was yes, I'm frustrated. The title doesn't make sense to me. Like it's just like Project Cars 2. It has the potential to do something awesome.
Yes. Yes.
Why could you not focus on the thing that you wanted to do? And if it was multiplayer, why couldn't we focus and make multiplayer amazing? If you want to have multiplayer and a career mode, then why can't we make the career mode really cool and engaging?
Right.
And it comes back to what we were talking about.
And wouldn't it be fun to build that? That's the thing that kills me when these things aren't. It's like, how hard would it be to kick back with a notepad for a couple of days and like just kind of plan out like, well, wouldn't it be cool if this happened? Or wouldn't it be cool if in the middle of your career you were faced with this new challenge? Just out of nowhere, to break up the norm, they've given you 3 races. It's kind of that point. You're like, okay, I'm seeing it to be a little bit of the grind in the career mode. And then out of nowhere, a total left turn, like, oh, you've been called by such and such to be a fill-in driver for such and such. They need you to finish better than 12th place. You know what I mean? I'm sitting here during a show, and it took me that much effort.
There's just a bevy of options that you could throw against this to make it engaging. And I touched on in part 2, like that core gameplay loop. There still has to be a loop. All these games, you look at your stupid phone games, all the way up to AAA titles. The ones that do amazing have a core loop. I talk about Shadow of the Tomb Raider. I actually liked that game. I know other people didn't, but it had a loop that I was interested. Same thing with Days Gone. It had a loop that I just wanted to keep engaging with, and so when that doesn't happen, it becomes a throwaway title, which is fine if that's Cranky Pants is a great example. And this is not a dig, because says for ACC, I paid $20 in early access. No biggie. I already get my dollar's worth. The risk factor was low about the cost of a meal. I just casually play every now and then until bugs are fixed. And that's perfect. If you're getting what you want out of ACC, then that's awesome. I am really happy people can get what they're looking for out of it. I just random call sign half-Assetto Corsa Competizione. That's kind of funny. I just think that for a 1.0 version that I paid, I was a dummy and paid $45, and then it went 10% off at full release. So I just feel like when you're releasing a 1.0 product. I think there are things nowadays as a consumer that we should be okay with and things we shouldn't be. And everybody has a different threshold about what they're willing to tolerate. And I totally understand that. So that's why I went through it the way I did. Another interesting, and I wanted to get your take on this, another interesting topic that has kind of arisen from how ACC 1.0 released is, as relatively part of the media, like we're indirectly part of the media. We may not be a nationally or world known gaming website per se, but we do have an influence to a much larger extent, like a Jimmy Broadbent, or a much lesser extent, like myself. My audience is fairly small. Do we have a, what do I want to say? Do we have, objection is not what I'm looking for. But anyway, do we have a responsibility? That's what I'm trying to think of. A responsibility to get a review out day one like that? Or is the responsibility to take our time with the title, flesh out all the things that we feel are important, and then give a comprehensive review, even though it's not on day one? And I think the argument is kind of being made that we should be out day one or day two because that's when people want to buy it, because they want to be part of that conversation. And my argument was, what I would say is not affecting that person. They have already made it up in their head that they're going to purchase the title. Now it's whether they agree with me or not, me being informational to them.
I agree with that.
So 100%. I was going to say, I took that as, here's a way for me to kind of bridge the gap. I'm going to show you what my first 6 hours were, and I'm going to get it out to you on day two. But I'm going to tell you this is not complete, and I'm going to come back with more thoughts. And then here's me 5 days later with my experience from hour 7 to 18.
Yes.
And at that point, I was just like, I don't want to play this anymore.
Right.
But I'm just curious, what is your take? Because it does seem to, because ACC seems like it's so divided, that it also seems to be split on the opinion when we should get these kind of reviews out and why.
Right. I think that the answer to that is actually very hard to determine because things have changed a lot from our perspective as the media, let's say. So let me go back in time a little bit. When the G27 came out, the famous yellow dress in show, we had that G27 for 3 or 4 weeks prior to doing the review. We were on an embargo, which meant that we could not say a word about it until the date that we released our show on that date, which meant that we had 3 to 4 weeks to, under total privacy, under total, nobody's listening, we're hammering on it, testing it, doing it, keeping it a secret. And then on the date that we're allowed, which others I'm assuming were allowed to on that same date, put out a review with our actual thoughts.
Yes.
And I always loved my job when it was those days, because I felt like, hey, look, I'm being given an opportunity to really test this. No placebo effect. I love it because it's new. I'm able to test it in multiple different disciplines so that my opinion is not just with one, if in the case of a wheel, it wasn't just how did it feel in Gran Turismo, but how did it feel in Gran Turismo, Forza, now I'm talking whatever games, the whole list of games. And to me, that was the only way for me as a reviewer to give a fair, real good opinion on it. Because I think it's very easy to have incorrect feelings early on. You're just not educated enough yourself.
Right.
Now, we had all the protection of the industry to give us that lead time to do this properly, by my opinion. Well, now it's different. Now, you get it. Everyone else gets it. There is no embargo date. It's the wild, wild west. Everyone run to the presses that minute, and if you don't, you're late. which then puts this bizarro pressure on these reviewers, as we call them, to go do exactly that. Yet, in my opinion, I personally cannot have a good foundation for my thoughts with that little time. You know, I need, and I also think that reflecting on things is as important as the moment. Like, how many things I do, like, I'll tell you what, racing bikes, playing soccer on a competitive level, racing cars is a job when you're in the moment. Like, I don't know. There was just something, like, I go back to kart racing. Yes, I'd have fun moments that I'd get excited about, but it was such an intense environment that it was not like having a birthday party, you know?
I like that. I would agree with that.
And it wasn't until I got home and emptied the trailer and was sitting on the couch watching TV, thinking back on the racing. That was the moment that the racing became as fun as the happy birthday. It was upon reflection. And so for me, as a reviewer, driving a wheel and thinking about it while driving is one thing. But it's when I step back from it and look at it from a distance that I now can actually start to really bring my thoughts together. So if somebody's depending on my thoughts to decide whether they should buy or not buy, I need to go through that process to be able to give you thoughts that I would want you buying or not buying on my recommendation, and I trust my opinion. So I don't like this new environment where we are forced to, and where many reviewers, so like my last few times, and I've been back and forth on this like you have,
Right.
I'm like, well, I have to go on the air or I'm late, right? And everybody's waiting for everyone to go on air, so I'm gonna miss out on the whole frenzy if I don't get that podium on my rig, go live. Then 20 other people will be doing it already, and there'll be no point in doing mine, so I'm forced to. But if you think you're going to get a review out of me in those first 2, 3, 4 live drives, it's not going to happen. So without saying that on air during the review to make it like, well, no point in watching this, that's kind of my thought. It's like, okay, you're going to hear, you're going to see the troubles that I have. You're going to see what goes well. You'll see and feel and hear some raw emotion in the moment in those early times. But I am withholding my real thoughts. You're not going to get the pros and the cons. You're not going to get my final thoughts. You're not going to get the is it worth it out of me in those early drives, because I just don't think it's fair. And I don't know if the industry will ever flip back to where we're working with embargo dates and waiting, or if this is the new norm. But I know how I'm going to proceed forward. But it's because something you said earlier. I don't want to have misinformation based on my lack of education.
Yeah, due diligence on the topic at hand.
Yes. Otherwise, all I'm giving you is what they told me. If I'm telling you my thoughts on the first 5 minutes, I'm telling you what they want you to hear. Because all I have is the marketing speak. Yes, exactly. I need my time to be able to see that despite them talking about a robust multiplayer system, that it is or isn't actually there. So, yeah, and I think it's going to be actually a tougher question to answer moving forward, because there are more and more streamers, more and more people rushing to that day one,
right?
And it's going to get even harder. So, but to be relevant, I think I have to be on the air, which is tough. So,
well, yeah, and that's the problem is, to be relevant. That's why I kind of took the approach that I did. There's nothing wrong with streaming the game right out of the box. It gives somebody a raw first impressions. For me, that just didn't work, and I just found the anxiety. Somebody mentioned Boost Media, and I need to watch more of Boosted Media, by the way. But the anxiety of trying to outwardly, I'll tell you what got me was I bought for Assetto Corsa, I bought the Group 5 pack, the mod pack, and now I forget what it's called. I apologize. But I had a problem with the streaming where it was actually doubling and giving me an echo. I had no clue.
Uh-huh.
But that's That's what people got.
Right. Right.
And after I realized what had happened after I was done with the live stream, number one, I felt like a moron. And number two, I took it down because that's not a fair representation
Right.
to what's going on. And I'm not saying everybody makes mistakes like that, but the potential is there and you can't. Yes, DRM, thank you. DRM revival. The potential is there to make those mistakes. And I don't want that.
Right.
I want to try to be as informative and correct as I possibly can. But then, like you said, you miss out on, if you don't put something out when something new comes out, you're almost lost in the mix.
Yep.
And you don't get the traction, you don't get the attention that everybody else is getting. And I just felt like the way I was going to approach it maybe could bridge the gap between the two. Hey, I know this is not a review, but I'm taking the time to edit. I'm taking the time to bring up and point out things. And this is my journey as I'm going along. And so I thought the idea, and not saying that you couldn't get a review out on ACC in 2 days, but the 18 hours that I've spent is still not enough.
Right. Right.
Is still
I
not.
completely agree.
My opinion is you'd have to spend a good 25 hours,
and that's
at the least to understand what's going on. Now, I understand in other sims that's not the case, but people have to realize 1.0, as far as I know, didn't drop until day of release for 1.0. It's not like people got it early and could do, work on it and then put out a review day one. We literally got it at the same time everybody else did.
Right.
So that was my point, is that if it's a full-on review, like, I don't know how much I would put stock into what the person's saying, because my own experience is like, dude, I've put 18 hours into this. And while I've covered a lot, there's still more to cover.
Right.
I don't know.
Well,
you might be able to put a review out on day 2, but I just don't know how you can do that.
A competizione is actually light in content. 1 car series, a handful of tracks, a lot of sim titles have so many different disciplines within them that how could you? Like, physics isn't a one-size-fits-all topic. You can have a game where, like, hey, those front-engine, rear-wheel drive cars handled great, but the four-wheel drive cars were all wrong, or the mid-engine cars were all wrong.
Right.
And you could be giving a review based on 1 car if you're doing it on day 1, or even in up to 8. How many hours do you put in before you're even a second model of car sometimes, And so I don't think that's very fair. And here's the other thing. Outside of like a movie, think about most reviews that you get on things that you'd consider hardware or software, with some depth to them. But it's like, the guys who do car reviews, real life car reviews, they're not driving it on a test drive like you do when you're going to buy a car and then give you an entire review of the car. It's like they need to know how it in my opinion, they need to know how it handles on a rough road, on a smooth road, on a country road, on a freeway. How does it do on gas mileage? Does it break down in the first 300 miles? Did it overheat? Did it put off a weird exhaust smell? Does the leather, smell funny when you get in the car? It's like, it takes time to truly test and judge and form an opinion on most things. And even on a movie, which sounds simple, but it's like, I don't know. Depends on how, I guess that's the other thing. How in depth of a reviewer are you? And I guess I think of myself as somebody, and I go back in time when we had like the Shabami. I've always tried to break things down into so many categories to really analyze it, not just on this simplistic. It's like, oh yeah, it's a cool mouse, No, I want to break down this mouse into different departments, because like the Sim Pizza poll, every product might specialize in something else. And if you just judge them on a whole, that's one way, sure, but I do like to know the internal parts, and I do like to know the parts where they excel versus where they maybe don't excel.
Right.
And there's just no way to break down much of anything in life to that level quickly.
So the other extension to that would be, what is your opinion? Because this is, again, ACC is kind of brought up. It's funny how ACC has brought up not just the title itself, but more of gaming at large, which somebody made a post in one of mine in which I mentioned Fallout 76 and I mentioned Anthem, like these other games that have come out relatively in non-finished states for version 1.0.
Right.
Again, not small quality of life things, bigger problems. So I was kind of making a commentary on gaming as a whole without directly calling it out. But what is your opinion then on how, my opinion is, we should be judging it on day one? Like what happened when it came out to the public? But with the ever ongoing patches, right? We get these updates and patches. Some people felt it was not fair to criticize so harshly.
Right.
Because there's going to be an update that fixed that. There's going to be an update that's going to change that. There's going to be an update that will improve whatever problem you have.
Sure. I said it earlier. Codemaster's going to fix the pedal thing. Sure. I'm going to buy 19.
My response
I'm sure
is
it'll
always
be fixed.
You're wishing, you're hoping that could happen.
Yes.
So, but I'm just curious, is that something we, as people that are trying to be informational, we're trying to deliver information on a product, is that something we should be taking more into consideration? Is, hey, look, I know this is going to get better down the line, so I'm not going to give it such a harsh criticism day one. Maybe my harsh criticism, if it's not fixed, is going to come 2 weeks or a month.
Right.
Or what arbitrary time do we have to wait in order to give what I felt like what I did was a fair and levied or level criticism slash, there were things that I really like in ACC and I tried to make those known. Do you think that's just not optimal? Should we go in more of a direction that, hey, we should be waiting 3 months before we really hammer something?
So getting back to where we are. Well, if I'm going to watch you give your thoughts or opinions on the first couple hours of gameplay, I am going to learn certain things that as a consumer I need to know. Was it able to use his controls? So was he running into difficulty dealing with the UI, getting it fired up, getting it running? Was it a playable game? Did it bait him into that next hour? Right? And I think those are fairly important questions that I do have when a new title comes out. So even without you giving me a great foundation for the solid opinion on the quality or what the sim lacks or has going for it, I do have certain answers just by being along for that ride. And I think that's why I've kind of embraced the first drive, the first looks. Because you know what?
Sure.
I want you to see if I'm having a hard time.
Yeah, there's something valid to that. I agree.
And since the industry has changed, because getting back to the old days, 4 weeks with an embargo date, well, let's be fair. If the company sends you a wheel and it broke, you'd call them up and you'd be like, look, I'm trying to do my review and your wheel broke. And they're going to send you another one. And to be totally honest, I feel like it would be a little unfair to disclose that to the public, right? Like I don't know why that one broke. I don't know whether that was a flaw in the whole series of them or not.
Uh-huh.
If the second one broke, I'd be like, wait, this is junk. Or if it did something I remember when I did the Mad Catz wheel, and the first time I did that, I just gave it a really violent flick without even the power on, and I felt all the gears grind just like a crappy RC gearbox. And I'm like, oh, I know what just happened. That was the flattening of all those teeth around that little white gear. And this thing will never run. And so I never reviewed that wheel for that reason. I didn't even ask for a second one. I'm like, that was not unique to this one.
Sure. Okay.
So, but since they don't do it that way anymore, and since the version that's going on my rig is a production model no different than any other consumer would have, well, now I want the public to know, but I want them to see it happen to me, not just be like, oh, and this one broke, but you didn't see it because it happened behind the scenes. It's like, no,
Right.
they're gonna be there. Or like the Fanatic. I mean, not to beat up on Fanatic, but in the case of like the podium, I'm having electronical interference. Like, there's my rig. It works like a champ. Take my wheel off, put the Fanatic on, and I get a buzz across my microphone and my headphones. And I can put a grounding wire on it. And it got rid of 90% of the noise, but 10% is still there. And everybody's experienced that with me. But I think that that's fair. I paid $1,500 for that wheel.
Right. And I would agree. There is validity to how you initially feel about something. So that's why I said I don't think what streamers are doing when they fire up something, have no idea where the controls are, and are trying to find where everything's at. I don't think that's not valid, as long as they're letting the audience know that, hey, I haven't touched this. This is, this is just me getting to grips with what's going on. This is not me trying to put out an actual review. And that, I think that was my only real kind of argument, is if you're talking about an actual review, and to me a review is an in-depth analysis of all the systems in a title, right? I wouldn't play Red Dead Redemption 2 for 5 hours and go, here's my review.
Right.
And I don't think that a sim is absent from that kind of a conversation either. I think you need time with it as well. So like people are saying here, they like to actually watch a mix, which I think is perfect. As long as you know what you're getting from that particular person, I think it's all valuable and valid information. I saw some things from people that were giving reviews, and it wasn't people that I knew of. It was other people that I was not familiar with. Here's a review on day 1 or day 2, and it's the best thing that there ever was. And I'm like,
right.
It's not that you can't think that, but you're talking about things in here that aren't making sense to me, that just wouldn't be something that I would experience. It's what I know for a fact is objectively wrong with what you're saying. And I like what Random Call Sign said, is the point is that it's not fair, going back to fair criticism of what we should expect from patches and later on down the line. So the point is that it's not fair because a patch is going to potentially appear and nobody should ever get the title.
Right.
Which I agree with. If you're waiting for that thing to say, oh, well, it's great now, then why did we get it before it's great?
Right. Well, and I'll use ACC as an example. So it sounds like at 18-hour mark, you're to the point you're like, I'm done. And so it's like I'm sitting there thinking, well, what news of a patch would have to happen for you to then be like, okay, well, I guess they put some attention into that. I guess I'll get those patches, because now I don't know how many patches later, and I'll give it another try. Versus does it stay shelved forever kind of thing. I still speculate with the Competizione that Blanc Pain, as a series wanting to get better market share in the world.
Careful how you say that. You need your disclaimer going up, because I can never say it right either. I've been told it's Blanc Pain, Blanc Pan, Blanc Pawn, Blanc, everything but the thing that I originally said it was supposed to be.
No matter what, you got it wrong.
Right.
I think that they saw what was going on with esport. Like we said at the beginning, if there is an esport bubble, we're a little more protected from it than Call of Duty with Coca-Cola sponsorship. Okay. I think Blanc Pain wanted an esport ready game that represented their series, and that they were affiliated with iRacing, and that the parallel between iRacing's version and theirs, like you couldn't, like why bother sponsoring it? We're not even racing at the same tracks, right? I mean, that's a bottom line. We want you to race what we're racing this weekend so that it's relevant, so that you're marketing for our bigger series, essentially. And I'm just wondering if this game wasn't just kind of created out of the thin air, out of hey, we need an esport ready game built for us. What would it take to do it?
To market our series.
Yep. And so Kuno said, hey, we could do that for you. Maybe you open these doors for us. Maybe you make these connections for us. Maybe you give us this much money. We can knock it out. Then they went back to the drawing board and they're like, okay, well, we'll call it Competizione. What do we steal from a Seto original? Like, what is the foundation? And what do we need to put into it? So Blancpain just wanted an esport. That's all they asked us for. But if we're going to put it out, we know damn well we need to put a little more than that into it to actually sell it. So they filled in those gaps and then put out a title. And way back when it was announced, I even speculated and wondered, was Assetto Corsa Competizione? I need the name. What was the Gran Turismo? Not Sport. The other mid.
Talking Prologue?
Prologue. Was this a prologue? Was this, hey, Blancpain wanted this. They gave us connections or money or some justification to do it. We'll call it Competizione. We'll act like it has some big competition structure because that's what it's all about for their esport. Because they're already used, the SRO series, they're taking this from track to track now.
And that's, again, random call sign brings up ACC is not esport ready. And
no, and that's
and then James is like, ACC is not ready for anything. But I agree with people in the chat. I really like the driving part. So, if you're okay with that and you don't really care about anything else, I think that's great. But again, who is this made for? And like you're pointing out, so if this was a marketing push, right, a collaboration between the SRO and Kunos to put out a title like this, if it's for esports, why does it not feel esport ready? And but the funny thing is, they're having esport competitions with it
as we wait for patches. As we wait for patches to fix it.
Right? That was the best part is they made us wait for the patch. I think there was a way you could get like a beta version or something. But you're making the general public wait for a patch because you don't want it to mess up your SRO esport competition that's at the track. And I was just like, really? Is that where we've gone? Is that where we're headed?
It sure feels that way.
Screw the consumer. Screw the people that have bought the damn thing. We have a competition going on. We don't want to mess up with that. I just kind of like, the approach is just so bizarre. And again, it's indicative. I mentioned it earlier. It's indicative of gaming as a whole now, right? We've got and I think that's just.
I think Formula One's walking down that path.
Nintendo, if you look at Nintendo products, and people can laugh at Nintendo products, A, they sell a crap ton of stuff. B, all of their stuff comes out right out of the box. Right. Now they will add DLC. They'll do changes to that DLC. But if you look at what those guys may patch, which often it's not a patch, it's because they're adding something, versus the rest of the gaming industry, it's like, well, how come we can't do that still?
Right.
So it's just funny. I know we took a long time on this topic, but ACC has not only brought about things that A, I tried to change with what I was doing. B, how frustrating of a title it is for me. But then C, just where are we as people that deliver information to everybody? And how do we get that information out in an effective manner? And is there a right or is there a wrong way? Like, it just brings up, it's so funny how this title to me has brought up all these other things with the gaming industry,
right?
Which when Dirt Rally 2.0 came out, there were things in there indicative of the gaming industry that we could change, but doesn't seem to be on the same level as ACC. And maybe that's because ACC is so divisive for everybody. It's like you either like it or you don't. It's just it's very interesting.
I'm okay with the feeling that it's okay to just kind of like something. I mean, I think it's really cool. It brings some cool things. It's got some great effects. I also still come back to, and maybe this will sound a little spoiled, it's only $45. If you like GT3 cars, if you have liked Assetto Corsa or even Netcar Pro because you like the lineage, because it is very much Assetto Corsa in a lot of ways. And, you know, it's not a big, giant leap outside of their normal box. So, I mean, I kind of feel like anybody who's been around sim racing enough, there's enough foundation that you can make that choice without anybody's real thoughts. It's worth the money. Like, I mean, like, the game is worth the money. Now, if you're a huge...
I don't know if I feel the same way, but
I might still be
again,
clinging,
if you're happy,
I might still be clinging to a little bit of hope of the future, I guess, you know?
if you're asking me if the game is worth the money right now, and you didn't purchase it in early access for $20,
Right. You'd say
that
no.
would solely depend on how much you didn't care about anything else but the driving experience. If the driving experience is what you care about, you don't care about multiplayer, like the implementation of ranking, you don't care about the single player, you just care about getting on the track and driving, then yes, I would say the $45 is probably well worth your money.
And I think that's where I was coming from, because in my mind, I was thinking, okay, so right now, if I could find myself an ACC league where someone's going to get a decent server, you know, we're all going to be able to join and race regularly, a little bit of structure built into it, like a league environment, I'm going to really enjoy racing in that series.
Hold on just a second. Andy, how do I give the game back? When I spent 18 hours with it, how do I give the game back when I've paid $45? I don't understand what your point is. Do it like Nicky. He's positive, doesn't take these games serious because he is right. You're right. But I also have a right as a consumer to expect a certain level of quality, which is not there, regardless of whether it's a sim racing title or after 2 hours. No, I don't agree with that. After 2 hours, you don't know. I have to make a decision in 2 hours. But that's not how this works. And after 2 hours, if you watched what I did, I really liked the driving part. But as I played, no, I don't like the other parts of the game. I have that right as a consumer.
Sure. I after 2 hours would immediately say, oh, absolutely. So getting back to the quick review, right? If I did 2 hours of Assetto Corsa, I would turn to my community and I'd say, man, I'm really loving this game. It's totally worth the money. Because in 2 hours, all I would have experienced was the tip of the iceberg, which was showing signs of what could be really cool. But I don't know how it's going to play out. So, again, I'd been through, like, the rookie challenges. I did 3 different races, one in the dry, one in the wet, one in the dark.
Right.
You know, I got to experience it. Then I finally got into a different car. I did one multiplayer race in a totally different car at Silverstone. And I'm like, hey, that was really cool, other than the warping, which comes back to the main point of the multiplayer and all that kind of stuff. Because, again, it was just another matchmaking situation. Yes, warping. I mean, but I get that in iRacing. It's not like that we're free of that anywhere. So after 2 hours, I would have been like, awesome. But then I go back and I watch Billy's video. And then I come back to, for me, again, if I have a league to run it in, I love the cars, I love the sounds, I love the graphics, I love the driving. And for what I'd seen, I'd really, really enjoy running in that league, and it would be totally worth my money. Now, if that wasn't something that I found, if I'm just running around some generic rooms, not getting the racing that I'm really looking for, then that part's a failure or not worth the money to me, because this is my gripe of the sim racing industry. Again, we said it a few times. I bought my game, now what do I do with it? iRacing is the only company that has successfully answered that question for me. I love all of the sims across the board. Just love them. I do. I really do, for the most part. But it's that, what do you do with it? Like, if I can't find a group to play with, then what do I really have? And then it comes back to career mode. Comes back to single player mode. Because if you don't have a league, if you don't have a group of friends, you know, I'll use Wreckfest as an example. Absolutely the worst, the best bang for buck game you can buy, I think, is Wreckfest, because it's got a really robust, cool single player mode that actually keeps you wanting to play more, winning money, buying parts, getting free cars, all that kind of stuff. Fun. But yet I do have a group to play it with. and playing in multiplayer is so awesome that the game is just through the roof. But again, if I didn't have that collective group, the game would be 100% dependent on its single player career mode. Formula One 2000 right. games have always, I've never searched for a league. I've only done a handful of multiplayer races in my entire F1 career of the Codemasters title. And it's always been 100% dependent on the single player career, and whether it was the living the life or just having good championship seasons of racing, that has been the whole purpose of that game for me. And so in 2 hours, there's no way I'm going to get deep enough into it to know if that. Somebody had typed in earlier, a lot of games are made for maybe 40, 60 hours of storyline. You know, like if you played it on the quickest way through it, you know, and it's like, well, you know, in a lot of games, quite honestly, think about some games now. In the first 2 hours, you might still be to that point where the game's like pausing you and saying, in order to pick up a sword, press, you know, because they have those like the tutorial that goes along.
Game-breaking things later. I mean, you know, Andy, to his credit, says for me, it's too much being negative. That's fine, but I would ask you, what's the ratio then? You want me to then stifle my opinion. And my opinion is, to me, it's not negative. To me, I'm critiquing. I'm a critic. I'm critiquing the game. So I don't feel like I'm being too negative. I'm being factual. These are factual things that are wrong with what's going on. Now, then I insert my opinion. I wish they had a better career mode. I wish there were things that you could change here and there. But if those were the only problems, then I'd be like, you know, it's got a few things that are wrong or that don't work well. But overall, like Dirt Rally 2.0, I took the exception to. I didn't have the force feedback was bad, but overall, I really enjoyed what I was doing. There were things that I didn't care for, but overall, I would have told you that's worth it. Even though I had critiques of things. This, in my opinion, has more things that need to be critiqued. You're not going to pick that up in 2 hours. And Pelican says, you know, do you know about racing cars? I do. I've raced cars. I don't do them at the same level Nikki does, but I've raced World of Outlaw race cars, you know, the 410 sprint cars, 360s. I've done road racing. I've done plenty of stuff. I have an idea, but to say that that's a personal thing. If all you care about is the driving part and you can make that decision in 2 hours, that's great.
Right. That's
great. Then that's all that matters to you. To me, there's other things that matter just as much as we go down the line.
Yeah. Yep. And like you've said, I mean, you said all along, the driving part of this game is not where you're finding your complaints or problems or issues. Here's the other thing, getting back to review and timeline, since it sort of overlaps this. I think that if you're like an IGN type game, review type place, like I think IGN, and I don't think of them as doing like these hugely in-depth reviews. Like their reviews to me come off somewhere like halfway between we read the marketing so we know what the company thinks they're doing, and playing it for about an hour or two to kind of like be like, oh yeah, it looks cool and sounds cool. And then they're like, hey, this is a great game. But, like, they don't tell you why it's a great, you know, they don't go into great depth. And then when you and I are talking about the way that we look at things, the way we review, because I think you as a very in-depth person. I think of myself as a very in-depth person. And it's like if all you wanted was just a really simplistic version of, hey, here's what it is, and yeah, it's cool. You know, 7.5 stars, you know.
And again, that's not wrong. If that's what makes you happy, if that's how you're going to base your decisions, then that's okay.
Yes.
That's fine.
Yes.
That's just not how I'm going to do it.
Yes.
How you're going to do it.
And I think that for like an IGN type that today is reviewing Candy Crush, tomorrow it's Call of Duty, the day after that it's FIFA, the day after that it's racing, that I can see where that would be the way they do it, because come on, they're not pros at any of those games. Nobody is. Like, you're a specialist in the world of gaming. I mean, I'm not saying you can't be good at one or two games, but I mean,
right.
Like,
I think they all have their genres that they're into, and I kind of think that's how they base what they're doing. Usually, not all the
Yes,
time, because
right.
there have been points where people have called out, hey, you don't even know the series that you're talking
Yeah,
about. But in a generic sense, I think they do get put in lanes per
sure.
se about genres that they enjoy.
But I don't think the sim racing community is served well by people who really have been involved in sim racing for 10 or 20 years are forming their opinion, because I think that you're already asking for that next level of in-depth review. If it's just a general gaming review, sure, but now we're taking it to that next level. We're a bunch of sim racing dedicated shows talking about only sim racing. Oh, see, we're over time. We're both out of coffee.
We're all out.
I have to pee. I'm out of coffee. It's
Right.
way too much. But yeah, I think that because
And I'm
we've
not,
gone to
sorry,
that
real quick.
next
I'm not
level.
trying to discredit anybody in the chat. I appreciate everybody's opinion, whether they're pro or against something. Like, it's all a good conversation.
That's
This
why
is
we're
just a
here.
good conversation to have,
That's
in my
exactly why
opinion.
we're here. Um, I did a show a year and a half ago letting people know the other games that I played, right? Just because I like diversion. I'm not just a
Okay.
sim racer. And when I did that, I wasn't trying to give you a review of Roller Coaster Tycoon. I wasn't trying to give you a review of World of Warships or of Farm Simulator, were the three examples that came forward, because that's not my genre. I was
Right.
just saying,
Okay.
hey, these are three games that I play for fun. They fulfill my need for fun and entertainment. Here's why. But they weren't in-depth reviews, and I don't know if those games are perfect or flawed. And I'm sure that military people can tear World of Warships inside out and say, oh, that's all wrong, that's right, that's wrong. And I feel like when you're coming to your site or my site, you're coming to somebody who spent the time to build the foundation for those kind of opinions. Some of it overlaps with some real life wisdom, right? Your history
Mhm.
of racing, my history of racing. Some of it comes from a lifetime of being in this industry since its inception. And when you're going to those people, I think you are expecting more than 2 hours put in for their thoughts and opinions and breakdown, you know? And I think
Right.
that's the difference. I think both are right. There is no wrong here, but that coming from me, I don't want to do that. I don't want to. It's not even a right or wrong. I don't want to be put on the spot for my opinion on something that I care so much about. And that's the main thing right there. I care so much about these games, these titles, these products. I care so much that the information I give to you is accurate, not just factually, but opinion wise, because it's all very sacred to me. We're on sacred ground. We're in sim racing. This is my world. It's sacred.
Mhm.
And you don't play around. You don't screw around. You don't cut corners. You don't rush to judgment. You give it the respect it deserves. So that's kind of my
Yeah.
approach, right or wrong.
Right. Well, that was good. I mean, it's just like I said, I appreciate everybody's opinions in here. It's not that anything is right or wrong. It's kind of, I wasn't even going to bring this up. Like ACC, I felt like I had kind of said my piece already, and people were just going to be like, God, you're doing it again, which people probably already are. But we did get some people asking about it, and I think it just brings up a larger conversation, and that's what this show is about. Also, you can listen to this on iTunes, Stitcher, and
That's
SoundCloud
right.
if it's well, it's not iTunes anymore. Damn it, it's the
That's right.
Apple Podcasts, whatever. But if this is too long in video format for you, which I should have mentioned at the beginning of the show, not the end when you've probably already listened to all of this. Damn it. Um, but that's what this show is about. It's not to be like super negative, like I still kind of chuckle where be elitist or anything like that. It's just funnily enough, in the video, Gamer Muscle made a comment that said it better than I could actually say it of myself. He explained that I'm passionate, and the passion comes from, I know this could be a great title, and it's frustrating for me that it doesn't live up to the potential.
Mm-hmm.
And it, again, people look for different things, and if you're satisfied with it, it's not that you can't like it all. You can like it, but for me,
Right.
and I know I'm not the only one, because there was a boatload of people in my comments to those videos that felt the same way.
Sure.
So that just tells me that I'm not alone on my own island, and we need to, if there was a way that I could sit down before a game was released with a developer and go, give it to me. Let me spend 50 hours, 100 hours with this thing, whatever. And here's my suggestions. And then you can light those on fire with a blowtorch.
Right.
Or you can utilize some of them to potentially make your title just a little better.
Right.
That would be the dream scenario for me. I would love to be a consultant like that. That's not reality, though.
Nope.
A, they don't really care. Let's be honest. They probably don't really care. I'm probably pretty irritating. And B, I think that I hope that I'm putting it out in a way that is entertaining, but also is informative. And maybe if it does get back to the developers, I hope they can look at, I'm not just trying to be pissed off just to be pissed off. I'm not trying to sound like a spoiled brat. I'm passionate about the product that you've created, because in this instance, I really like some of the stuff you've got in there. Like the core driving to me is, my opinion, it's one of the best GT3s that I've driven. So you guys have done a great job with that.
Yeah.
Here's everything else, though. And this is what is preventing you from having an amazing title, a title that makes you stand out from everybody else.
Sure. Sure.
And so that's the hope in doing something like this, not just to rant and rave and a bunch of clicks and all this. If you've seen my content, I really don't care about how many clicks I get, right? It's more about putting out something that I'm proud of, putting something out that is informational. And I hope that that's what comes across. And I think we have these discussions because we may not agree on certain individual pieces, but I think the overall is we are trying to make this better, and we're trying to praise the things that are really good.
Sure. Sure.
You know, because like the Pro 4 and Pro 2 trucks, right? We're talking about how great, how much fun they are. Weeks ago, I'm talking about VRC Pro, the stupid RC car. I can't tell you how many people like contacted me, dude. I totally tried VRC, dude. I am so hooked. Like, it's so funny. It's those things. I want to inspire people to play those things.
Sure. Sure. Yes, I agree. I agree, especially if it's coming on your recommendation. You know, that's why we're here. That's what we're doing. All right. We definitely have to bring this one to close. So, what do you have going on, Billy?
I definitely want to try the race room cars.
Yeah,
the FR90s. Let's see what else. I don't think we have anything else coming out. I'm kind of working on some sort of, I don't really want to say what it is yet, but like a documentary isn't quite the right verbiage I would use. But some sort of a retrospective on my experience with some older titles that meant a lot to me, like either when I was a kid or like maybe something that shaped my love for racing games or sim racing. I'm trying to, in between this stuff, I'm trying to put out stuff that's like that, which I have a lot of fun going back and just playing those titles, but B, I don't know, I think it's just something a little different. So
I like it.
I'm kind of working
you said
on that.
Documentary, I was intrigued.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd like to be informational. I just don't know how far into the documentary style that I'm going to do. But yeah, it's something like that. So,
all right. Anything else?
No, just still working on, we're down to doing the mixes for the 3 songs for my band. And that's it. You?
Oh, now I'm about to give the world a big warning. Let's start off easy and small. Tonight, we have the SImpit Truck Series, race number 3 of 6. So that's tonight. Race room will open at 4:40. Anybody who's involved in it. iRacing did an interesting thing. They updated the truck to this new Gander, Silverado they did. I have already set up my whole season, with Tundra and Silverado.
Yeah.
Their system, I've already set up the rooms. Like, I should be on Fire and Forget. Like, I could go on vacation and it would all happen without me. The Silverado, which has been changed, got switched to, are you ready for this? If I didn't look at it, if Mark Michkowski had not come to me and said, hey, did you double check what it did? We would be racing a Toyota Tundra against an Aston Martin at Texas tonight. That's right. It defaulted every Silverado to the first car on the list, the Aston Martin. Yeah. So luckily I looked.
That would have been awesome.
Yeah, that would have been really funny. So I did fix it.
Tundra versus the DB9.
But I don't know, I don't know what they've done to the truck. Like, I had to change the setup, so we're a fixed setup, and, everything was really perfect before. Now I don't know if it's all going to be a mess. This season could be totally screwed up from this day forward. It really could be. The other thing is I've added this to the series just so people know. iRacing added green, white, checkered. I would not have won the last race. I can tell you, I would not have won the race had it not been for caution. If it had done green, white. So I added one. It gives you the ability to pick how many green, white checkers. So, I think NASCAR, it's unlimited, right? They'll be there all day to get it. You have to take the white
I think
flag.
it's within a certain reason. I
couldn't remember.
I think iRacing says up to 3. I don't know if that's a NASCAR rule or not, but I do believe there is some sort of cutoff, but it's typically caused by did the leader take the white flag or whatever.
So on ours, I was able to pick. I just put 1. We will do 1 green, white, checkered attempt if we, instead of and then we're going to call it a night. Because I don't want to be there all night to finish the race, So, and our guys run pretty clean. So, anyway, that's tonight at 4:40. Tomorrow, SRS Race Room IndyCar Formula Series starts up. I'm not going to be able to make that, but if you're looking for some good race room racing, that starts up tomorrow on Sim Racing Systems. I believe tonight and yesterday was the Alfa Romeo. Anyway, so lots of little background racing going on. Beyond that, I'm going to do some truck racing this weekend for sure. I think I'm just going to probably just set up a bunch of rooms and just have fun with the trucks.
I can't wait to have more time with it.
And then the last thing I'm going to announce is, please forgive me, everybody, but I have no idea my schedule over the next 3 weeks. So I have been booked to work E3, which is the 11th, 12th, and 13th. Are the dates of the show. I'm working... Oh, and this is a little news. Maybe I'll get us some stuff from E3. But I'm working with WRC8 at the Big Ben booth. So I'll get a first-hand look at WRC8.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, there's only 2 things at all of V3 for sim racing. Next Level is going to be there, and they have some new stuff that I want to go see. And WRC8. That's it. EA is we're not bringing Need for Speed. Microsoft already pulled out. GT isn't going to be there doing it. There's nothing sim racing.
Well, Microsoft will be there. It's Sony that won't be there.
Right, Sony, right. But they have nothing going on because they already told us there wasn't going to be this. So it's it's going to be the worst E3 ever as far as sim racing goes, other than
worst E3 ever.
But I am looking forward to WRC8. I don't know if I'm doing Monday and Friday set up and close down. I think I am, which means I won't be here next week at all. Billy and I already talked about pre-recording next Friday's show, so that should be a go, right? I think we're on for that. So there will be a Beyond the Sim next Friday, normal time, pre-recorded. And then I'm flying to England. And I'm going to England, to London, for 2 weeks that could turn into 3 weeks. It's kind of sketchy. Also, I don't have a plane ticket in my hand. So as I'm sitting here telling you guys, I don't know my schedule for the next 3 weeks. I don't know if I'm working Monday and Friday next week. I do know I'm working E3. I don't know exactly the day I leave for London, but I'm pretty much leaving for London.
I'm just going to stow away in your luggage. I want to go to Europe.
I'm so excited. So I'm scared and excited. I think I can tell you guys, I'm working with McLaren. That's all I can say. I'm working with McLaren. No, I'm not going to be Rudy Van Buren. No, I'm not sim racing for McLaren. No, I'm not racing for McLaren, but I am working with McLaren on something.
Does anybody really need to know that? I mean, you could be.
It could
Just
be.
saying.
I just didn't want to let people get carried away with their thoughts. So it's not as glamorous as it sounds. So yeah, I don't know. I'll keep people informed. I'll let you know. I'll try to go on the air when I can. But it's gonna
Yeah,
be.
we're gonna try. We're at least gonna try and do something. It may be cool. We don't know if it's gonna work, but we're gonna try and do like an on location. Maybe Shaun can just do a
Cell phone video.
Beyond the Sim
Yeah.
with me that I can record, where we can just talk about the happenings and whatnot. So we're still gonna try to at least do this show, even though you're not gonna be here.
Yeah.
Trying to work out something.
And when I'm there, yes, depending on timing, I'm working on this trip, so it's not a vacation, unfortunately. But I am hoping to reach out. I don't know the dates or exactly where I'll be. I'm hoping to reach out to like James and Jimmy and Brendan Lay and a few other people that we do know who are there in the area. Yeah, so but I have to get a hold of my schedule first. Without a schedule, I can't make plans. And it is a work gig that's totally custom, so I'm predicting like 14-hour days. Like I'm predicting it being very hard to actually make plans, unfortunately. So anyway, but that's what I have going on. So I'm apologizing on the behalf of the SImpit for what's going to be a little bit of a dry spell with content as I've been gone. I will try to go live periodically, and if I don't know the rules of what I can and cannot show when I'm there. I'm hoping there are no rules, at which point I'm going to give you guys updates on what's going on.
There's no rules.
So, but I don't know, and I can't get ahead of these things until I'm there. So, anyway, forgive me, forgive the SImpit, and we'll still have Beyond the Sim and try to get as much going and happening during that time. Anyway, that's it.
Sounds exciting.
Yeah, it's a lot going on. I'm pretty excited. And now, wow, I just realized that we're at a 3-hour show today. That's a world record.
Oops. Sorry.
I hope it's been entertaining. I see that we've had 98 people, so I think we've entertained our group for the show. Be sure to like, subscribe, thumbs up. Be sure to get over to Billy Strange Racing on YouTube as well and like and subscribe to that because he's half of this show, but he's got his own channel. So if you haven't already, some people brought up that I'm not even subscribed to your channel. I am. I'm not logged in on this particular browser. This is the one right here.
That's funny.
Just so you know, I am absolutely subscribed to Billy
I don't know.
Strange.
I might not subscribe to me either. So.
So anyway, that's going to do it for this one. Billy, thank you so much. It's been a blast.
Thank you. It's been a great show. Thanks to everybody in the chat.
Yep. Get out there, do some racing, and be here next week to tell us what's hot. Actually, you can't tell us. We won't be live next week. So, but get out there, do some racing, have a good time, have a great weekend. This is Beyond the Sim. I'm Shaun Cole, and we will see you on the track.
See ya.